My awkward handshake habit got way out of control. So this all started about a year ago when I moved into this upscale apartment building in downtown Chicago. I had just landed a new job as a marketing consultant, and it was the first time in my life I could afford a place that had a lobby, doorman, and valet service. Everything felt so grown up and professional, and honestly, I wanted to fit in and seem like I belonged there. The building had 3 regular doormen: Greg, the older one who'd been there forever and knew everyone; Tyler, the super friendly guy in his 20s who always had earbuds in but would pull one out to say hi; and Luis, the quiet one who didn't talk much but always nodded politely. On my first week, I noticed most residents just nodded or waved when they came in or out. But for some reason, I decided to shake Greg's hand when he opened the door for me that first morning. Maybe I was nervous. Maybe I wanted to show gratitude. Maybe I was overcompensating for imposter syndrome. Whatever it was, I just did it. Firm handshake. Smile quick, thanks. Man, he seemed pleasantly surprised and said, "Hey, you're one of the polite ones." That one gesture turned into a routine. The next day, I did the same with Greg. The day after that, Tyler was on duty, so I shook his hand too. Then I started doing it every time I walked in or out. Morning, evening, weekend, didn't matter. Before I knew it, it had become my thing. At first it wasn't awkward. In fact, it kind of felt good. They all started recognizing me. "Morning, Chris." "Hey, big handshake guy." It gave me this weird sense of belonging. Like I was part of this little community of lobby regulars. Some of my neighbors even started giving me the, "Oh, you're that handshake guy." Look, I didn't mind. I was friendly, approachable, and consistent. But then things slowly started to spiral into the strange and uncomfortable. One day, I came home juggling groceries, keys, and a coffee. Greg opened the door, and without thinking, I shifted everything to my left arm so I could keep the handshake routine going. I almost dropped the milk in the process, but I still did it. He chuckled and said, "Man, you're dedicated." That comment stuck with me. Dedicated, or just weirdly obsessive. I started realizing I had to do it. Like if I didn't shake their hands, it felt wrong. I couldn't just nod or say hi anymore. It would feel incomplete, disrespectful even. I created this unspoken rule in my head that if I didn't shake their hand, they'd think I was mad or being rude. It got worse when new doormen rotated in one weekend. A temp worker was there covering for Luis. I went in for the handshake, and the poor guy looked completely thrown off. He awkwardly returned it, but it was limp and half-hearted. I could tell he thought it was strange. Now here's where things really got awkward. The pandemic-style awareness never really left people, you know? Some folks still don't love physical contact, and I noticed Tyler, especially, started to subtly avoid the handshake. He'd be adjusting his hat or holding a clipboard, or pretending to be busy when I walked up. I told myself I wouldn't force it, but my hand still automatically went out every time. Sometimes I'd stand there like an idiot, half smiling, hand out, waiting. The silence would stretch, and then he'd reluctantly sigh and shake it. I could feel the awkwardness dripping off both of us. Then one night around 11 p.m., I came back from meeting friends. I'd had a few drinks, feeling bold. And as I walked in, Luis opened the door and gave his usual quiet nod. I blurted out, "Come on, man, where's the handshake?" and reached out. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but went along with it. The next morning, I felt awful. I'd made him do something he clearly didn't want to. That was the moment I decided I needed to stop, just stop shaking hands altogether. It was getting too weird, except I couldn't. The next day, Greg was there. As soon as I saw him, he smiled and said, "What's up, boss?" And before I even thought about it, my hand shot out again, automatic muscle memory. I tried to break the pattern by switching to fist bumps. That worked for a few days until Greg jokingly said, "What happened? You done with the handshakes?" And just like that, I was back at it again. Then came the final straw. It was raining hard one evening, and I came home soaked, holding an umbrella. I tried to juggle it all and still shake hands with Greg, but the umbrella slipped and hit him in the chest. He laughed it off, but I was mortified. I stood there dripping water on the marble floor, apologizing, still half reaching out like a complete idiot. After that, I started timing my exits and entrances to avoid them. If I saw one of them at the door, I'd pretend to take a phone call or go in through the parking garage instead. Sometimes I'd wait in my car until the shift changed. Now it's this whole ridiculous dance. They probably think I'm being weirdly standoffish, but I'm just trying not to make it more awkward. I know I could just tell them, "Hey, I'm trying to stop the handshake thing. Nothing personal." But somehow that feels even weirder. Like I'd be making a big formal announcement about something nobody else even cares about. So now I'm stuck in this cycle. Too self-conscious to keep shaking hands. Too awkward to stop. And the worst part? Every time I walk past that lobby, I can feel the ghost of a handshake wanting to happen. Update. My handshake habit. Finally blew up in my face. Okay. So I wasn't planning on posting an update. But something happened that I honestly can't stop thinking about. I might have officially become that guy in my building. The awkward handshake dude who made the doormen uncomfortable. It's been a few months since I wrote that original post back then. I was mostly trying to phase out the handshake thing quietly, hoping the awkwardness would fade away with time. Spoiler, it didn't. If anything, it got even messier in ways I couldn't have imagined. After the umbrella incident with Greg, I really tried to pull back. I started giving polite nods, quick, "Hey, how's it going?" And even practiced keeping my hands in my pockets when walking through the lobby so I wouldn't instinctively reach out. But then something weird happened. Greg brought it up first. One morning I came down for work, and he goes, "What, no handshake today?" I froze. I laughed awkwardly and said something like, "Trying to give you guys a break," he chuckled. But then added, "Nah man, that's your thing. It's your trademark. Trademark." It hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd unintentionally branded myself as the handshake guy, the one who greeted everyone like a politician running for office. And now, if I stopped, it would be noticeable. People expected it. For a while, I gave in again, mostly with Greg since he seemed fine with it. But then I noticed the other guys weren't exactly enthusiastic. Tyler, especially, had started giving me half handshakes. You know, that thing where they grab your fingers instead of your hand because they're not fully committed? That kind of limp, hesitant grip that screams, "Please don't make me do this." Luis remained polite but distant, always a nod. Sometimes a good evening. But I noticed he'd often step aside before I reached him, pretending to adjust the door handle or check something on the monitor. It was subtle, but I knew he was dodging it, and honestly, I couldn't even blame him. Then one day, things escalated. The building manager, a woman named Sarah who's probably in her early 40s and very no-nonsense, called me into her office. She was polite but had that tone that instantly makes your stomach drop. She said, "Hey Chris, I just wanted to talk about something that's come up." Apparently, someone, she didn't say who, had mentioned that I made them uncomfortable in the lobby. I immediately started panicking internally, thinking, "Oh God, I didn't do anything wrong, did I?" But then she clarified, "It's nothing major, just a few staff members said you tend to be a little overly friendly with physical greetings." Overly friendly, I felt my face burn. I explained that it was never meant to make anyone uncomfortable, that it started as a habit, and that I was actually trying to stop. She nodded and said she understood, but gently added, "Maybe just keep it to verbal greetings from now on." I walked out of that office wanting to crawl into a hole. For days I couldn't even look the doorman in the eye. Every time I walked through the lobby, I felt like everyone was silently judging me, like they were thinking, "There goes the handshake guy who got talked to by management." Greg tried to make it less awkward. A few days later he said, "Hey, don't worry about that, man. Some folks are just uptight." But I could tell even he was pulling back a bit. No more extended handshakes, just quick nods or waves. But then came the most painfully awkward encounter yet. It was a Friday night, and I'd ordered takeout. I went down to grab it, and Tyler was at the desk. As I waited, the delivery driver handed me my bag, and I said, "Thanks, man," out of habit, and then turned toward Tyler as he opened the door. And before I even realized it, my right hand was already out. I swear it was muscle memory. Tyler stared at it for a moment, then gave this tight-lipped smile and said quietly, "We're good." Man, it was the most humiliating moment of my adult life. I muttered something stupid like, "Oh yeah, sorry," and scurried off like an embarrassed teenager. After that, I made a promise to myself. No more handshakes, ever. I started going through the side entrance that leads directly from the parking garage to the elevators. I even started timing my comings and goings to avoid peak hours. For the first time since moving in, I felt like a complete outsider in my own building. But then something unexpected happened a few weeks later. One morning, I was running late for a meeting and had to go through the main lobby. Greg was there as usual. I tried to give him a quick wave and slip out, but he called out, "Hey, Chris! Haven't seen you in a while, everything good?" I hesitated, then said, "Yeah, just been keeping a low profile." He laughed. "Man, you don't have to be weird about it. You're good with us." And for some reason, that hit me harder than it should have. I realized I'd been so caught up in my own anxiety and embarrassment that I'd turned something innocent into this huge psychological battle. Nobody was really angry. They were just confused by my intensity. After that talk, I stopped avoiding the lobby. I went back to normal greetings. Just smiles, nods, a friendly, "Hey, how's it going?" And it felt so freeing. I think I finally broke the habit. No handshakes, no awkward pauses, no forced contact, just normal human interaction. But every once in a while, when Greg opens the door for me, I still feel my right hand twitch, like an old reflex that refuses to die. It's weird how something so small can spiral into a full-blown identity crisis. If there's a lesson here, it's this. Sometimes politeness can cross into obsession without you realizing it. And if you ever move into a fancy building, maybe just stick with a wave. Final update. The handshake saga comes full circle. It's been almost 6 months since my last update, and I think it's finally safe to say the handshake era of my life is over. Though it ended in the most unexpected, hilarious, and weirdly wholesome way possible. After that talk with Greg, I felt a lot better about things. I'd stopped avoiding the lobby and just acted normal again. Smiles, nods, quick greetings, nothing fancy. For a while, everything was great. I was no longer the handshake guy, just Chris from 9B, and I was totally fine with that. But then, of course, life had to throw one last curveball. It started a couple months ago when the building announced a big resident appreciation event. A catered rooftop party with food, drinks, and live music. Normally, I would have skipped something like that because I'm more of a keep-to-myself kind of person. But I'd been trying to be more social. Plus, Greg told me personally, "You better show up this time," since apparently I'd missed the last few, so fine, I went. I showed up around sunset. And it was actually a really nice vibe. The rooftop had lights strung across, a DJ, and everyone was chatting and laughing. I saw some neighbors I vaguely recognized, plus a few staff members, including all 3 doormen, Greg, Tyler, and Luis, helping out with the catering team. I hadn't really interacted with Tyler or Luis much since the whole awkward handshake phase, so I figured I'd just keep it light and friendly. But then Greg spotted me and shouted, "Chris!" The handshake legend himself. Half the crowd turned toward me. I swear time froze. Tyler started laughing, and someone yelled, "Wait, you're the handshake guy!" Apparently, Greg had told some of the residents about it. Not in a mean way, just jokingly, like, "You remember that one guy who shook everyone's hand for months?" I wanted to melt into the floor, but instead of letting the embarrassment consume me, I decided to just lean into it. I walked over to Greg, grinned, and said, "You know what? For old time's sake," I stuck my hand out. He laughed so hard he almost dropped his drink, but he shook it. Then someone else jokingly yelled, "I want one too." And before I knew it, I was shaking hands with a line of residents and staff, like it was some kind of bizarre redemption arc. It became this running gag at the party. People started making jokes like, "Oh, we're in the presence of the handshake pioneer. And careful, he might not let go." I played along, because honestly, it felt better to laugh at myself than keep running from it. Even Tyler came over at one point, smirking, and said, "You know what, man? I respect your commitment." He offered me his hand this time, and I swear I had to hold back tears of laughter. Luis even joined in later, giving me the most formal handshake ever, like he was knighting me into the building's lore. It turned from something awkward into this weird, shared joke that broke the ice between me and everyone else. After that night, things changed. The lobby no longer felt tense. Greg and I still chat every morning, but now it's more casual. Like 2 guys who've been through a small social war together. Tyler's cool with me again, always cracking a joke about handshake PTSD. Even Luis, the quiet one, sometimes gives a small smirk and says, "No handshake today, huh?" It's funny how something that once caused me so much anxiety became the thing that connected me with people. Then last week, something really unexpected happened. I came home from work, and there was a little gift bag at the front desk with a note taped to it. It said, "To Chris, for keeping things classy and awkward." From the doorman, inside was a small wooden plaque that read, "Building 242's official handshake ambassador, 2023-2024. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. It's sitting on my kitchen counter now, and honestly, I'm kinda proud of it. What started as an anxious habit spiraled into months of embarrassment, but somehow came full circle into something wholesome and funny that brought me closer to the people around me. I think that's the irony of it all. I was so worried about how I looked that I forgot the reason I started doing it in the first place. To connect, to be kind, to show gratitude. Now, I do that in other ways. A smile, a genuine, "How's your day?" Sometimes even bringing the staff coffee on a cold morning. No more handshakes, but definitely more connection. And every time I walk past the front desk, Greg still jokes, "Careful, everyone. The ambassador's here." I just laugh and wave. Hands firmly in my pockets. Stories number 2. My best friend uninvited my husband from her wedding, so I dropped out entirely. I never thought I'd find myself in this kind of situation. Standing in the middle of a friendship that's lasted nearly 2 decades. Staring down the barrel of an invitation that suddenly doesn't include my husband. It's been a whirlwind of emotions. Guilt, anger, and confusion, and honestly, I still don't know if I made the right call. So, to start from the beginning, I met Lauren my freshman year of college. We were randomly assigned as dorm roommates, and by some stroke of luck, we hit it off instantly. We were total opposites. She was loud, spontaneous, and loved attention, while I was more reserved and cautious, but somehow it worked. Over the years, she became like family. We survived breakups, late-night study sessions, cross-country moves, all of it. She was my maid of honor at my wedding. When she got engaged last year, I was thrilled. Her fiancé, Evan, seemed great, a little quiet, but thoughtful and clearly adored her. She immediately asked me to be her maid of honor. And of course I said yes. I was honored. I helped her pick the dress, design invitations, coordinate colors, plan the bachelorette. I did everything a best friend should. But things started to shift about 4 months ago. It began with a dinner at my house. My husband, Ryan, made a light joke about wedding budgets when Lauren was venting about costs. Something harmless like, "Trust me, you'll blink and spend a month's rent on flowers." It was meant to be relatable, not insulting, but Lauren didn't laugh. She got this tight smile and said, "Well, not everyone can cut corners." The air went cold. Ryan immediately apologized and said he didn't mean anything by it. The conversation moved on. But after that night, something felt off a few weeks later. Lauren started excluding Ryan from group plans. Like, if she was hosting a couples night, she'd say, "Oh, it's just the bridal party this time." Or she'd invite me to brunches, and then mention later that everyone else brought their partners. When I asked if something was wrong, she brushed it off and said she just wanted to keep things focused on wedding stuff. It all came to a head about 2 months before the wedding. Lauren texted me saying she needed to talk about something important. I assumed it was bridesmaid logistics, but when I called her, she sounded tense. She told me she had to make a difficult decision, and that she didn't want Ryan at the wedding anymore. I thought I misheard her. When I asked why, she hesitated, then said, "It's just, his energy doesn't mesh well with the vibe we're going for. Evan feels uncomfortable around him." I was floored. My husband isn't some loud, confrontational guy. He's kind, calm, and barely drinks. He's one of those people everyone usually loves. I pressed for specifics. What did he do? What did he say? And she couldn't give me anything solid. Just vague comments like, "He makes people uneasy," or "He's not really part of this chapter of my life." That last one stung. I told her I wasn't okay with that. I said, "You're asking me to stand next to you on your wedding day while my husband sits at home uninvited. That's not fair." She insisted it wasn't personal, and said she hoped I'd understand. I didn't. I spent days thinking about it. Ryan told me to just go. Said he didn't want to cause drama and that he'd be fine staying home. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt wrong. He's my partner, my person. The idea of dressing up, smiling, and pretending everything was fine while he sat alone in our apartment just ate at me. I decided to call Lauren again and tell her I couldn't be in the wedding. I tried to be gentle. I said, "I love you, but I can't celebrate your marriage while you're excluding mine." She didn't take it well. She accused me of making her wedding about myself, and said I was throwing away our friendship over a guest list. She cried, said she was under stress, and that Evan just had a weird feeling about Ryan. I told her unless there was an actual reason, something concrete, I wasn't comfortable supporting the decision. We went back and forth for almost an hour. It ended with her saying, "Fine, do whatever you want," and hanging up. The next day, she texted me a short message. "Thanks for letting me know. I'll have one of the bridesmaids drop off your dress so you can get it altered somewhere else. Take care," and that was that. I thought maybe after a few days she'd cool down, but instead, I started hearing things from mutual friends. Apparently, she told people I bailed on her out of jealousy, that I made a scene over something small, and that Ryan was toxic. It was humiliating. Most of our mutual circle took a step back from both of us. Probably not wanting to choose sides, I tried reaching out one more time, sending her a long message about how much her friendship meant to me, and how I wished we could talk things through. She left it on read. The wedding came and went. I saw the photos on Instagram. She looked stunning, of course. The bridesmaids I used to hang out with were all there smiling, posting group shots with captions like "best day ever with the best people," and as ridiculous as it sounds, it hurt like hell. Ryan, bless him, tried to cheer me up that weekend. We went to a small cabin outside the city and just unplugged for a couple of days. I thought maybe distance would help me move on, but honestly, I still think about it. It's not even just about being uninvited. It's the way she handled it. No explanation, no honesty, just vague excuses and a total dismissal of our friendship. The last piece of this story came a few weeks ago when one of our old college friends, Jenna, told me what really happened. Apparently, Evan had overheard Ryan at that dinner months ago, when he made the harmless wedding budget joke, and thought Ryan was being judgmental or implying that they couldn't afford things. Evan apparently told Lauren afterward that Ryan looked down on him, and Lauren, being the peacekeeper she always tries to be, decided it was easier to just uninvite Ryan quietly than to confront the misunderstanding. Except, of course, that made everything worse. I guess in her mind, it was easier to hurt me quietly than risk upsetting Evan or her wedding plans. I haven't spoken to her since. I don't know if I ever will. I still miss her sometimes. But I also know that if she couldn't respect my marriage, she didn't really respect me. I keep that wedding invitation, the one with both our names crossed out, in a drawer. Not because I want to remember the pain, but because it reminds me of something important. Loyalty shouldn't come with conditions. And as for Ryan, he still jokes sometimes when we get invitations in the mail. Think they'll let me come to this one? And it makes me laugh, but deep down, I'm grateful. Because he never made me choose, he just stood by me. Even when it meant losing someone I thought I'd have forever. Maybe one day Lauren and I will cross paths again. Maybe we'll talk or maybe we won't. But I've learned that friendships, like marriages, only last when both people actually want to show up. Update. She reached out after the wedding, and I didn't expect what happened next. I honestly thought that chapter of my life was closed. After I dropped out of Lauren's wedding, I figured we'd just go our separate ways and maybe, years down the line, we'd run into each other and do that awkward, polite, "Oh hey, how have you been?" thing. But life has a funny way of reopening doors you swore you'd locked for good. It's been about 4 months since the wedding when this all went down. I hadn't heard a single word from Lauren since the text, where she basically told me to take care. I'd accepted that the friendship was over. I'd deleted her number, unfollowed her on social media, and done all those little symbolic things you do when you're trying to move on. Then one Thursday night, out of nowhere, I got a text. It was from an unknown number, but I knew who it was the second I saw the typing style. "Hey, it's Lauren, can we talk?" My stomach dropped. I stared at it for a long time. Ryan was next to me on the couch. half watching some cooking show, and when I told him, he just said, "Up to you, but if you do, make sure it's something you actually want, not something you feel guilty about." I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity, and maybe a little bit of leftover love for the friendship, won. I texted back, "Sure, what's up?" She replied instantly, "Can we grab coffee this weekend? I owe you an apology." That alone stunned me. Lauren wasn't the type to admit she was wrong, ever. We met that Saturday morning at this small cafe we used to go to in college. The second I walked in and saw her sitting there, it hit me just how much I'd missed her. But there was this heaviness between us, this invisible wall of everything unsaid. She looked different, tired maybe, or just older. We made awkward small talk for a few minutes before she finally took a deep breath and said, "I screwed up badly." And she did something I honestly didn't expect. She told me everything. Apparently, things hadn't been picture perfect after the wedding. Evan had been distant, snappy, even controlling about little things. They'd gotten into multiple fights during their honeymoon, because he was embarrassed that some of the guests had heard rumors about the maid of honor drama. He told her she'd handled it wrong and made him look bad by uninviting my husband. She said that was the first time she realized how manipulative he could be. According to her, Evan had twisted that night at our dinner way more than I ever imagined. He told her he thought Ryan was mocking him and disrespecting their relationship. And when she tried to brush it off, he apparently said something like, "If he's going, I'm not comfortable having him there." And instead of standing up for me, her best friend of nearly 20 years, she caved. She admitted that she'd been afraid of rocking the boat before the wedding, afraid of looking like the difficult bride, afraid of starting her marriage off with a fight. So she cut my husband out to make things easier, and now she regretted it. Deeply, she started crying halfway through telling me all this. She said she missed me every day, that she'd kept wanting to reach out but was too ashamed. She said the wedding didn't even feel complete without me there, that she'd catch herself looking for me during speeches, during photos, during moments she thought I'd be beside her, and realizing she'd chosen wrong. I'll be honest, I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to hug her. The other part wanted to scream. I told her the truth. That what hurt the most wasn't just that she uninvited Ryan, but that she didn't even talk to me about it. That she made me feel like a problem instead of a person she could communicate with. She nodded through tears and kept saying, I know. I was a coward." Then she told me something I didn't expect. She and Evan were taking a break. Apparently, after a few months of constant arguments and him showing a controlling side, she'd moved in temporarily with her sister, she said. "I think I married him for the wrong reasons, and I think I pushed away the one person who actually would have told me the truth." It was surreal. I didn't know what to say. We ended up talking for almost 2 hours. I told her about how things had been on my end, how humiliating it was hearing rumors, how painful it was to see the wedding photos online, how Ryan had been unfairly painted as the villain. She apologized over and over again and asked if I thought he'd ever forgive her. When I got home, I told Ryan everything. He listened quietly and said, "She sounds like she's trying." "That's something at least." Then he asked, "Do you want to be friends with her again?" And that was the hardest question of all. I told him I didn't know, because honestly, even though she seemed genuinely remorseful, part of me still couldn't shake the betrayal. When someone shows you that they'll throw you under the bus to keep their peace, it's hard to forget. But still, she was my best friend for years. I couldn't just erase that. A week later, I invited her over for dinner. Something simple, nothing fancy. Ryan agreed to it because, in his words, "If this helps you heal, I'm in." When she came over, it was emotional but surprisingly warm. Ryan was incredibly gracious. He shook her hand, said, "No hard feelings," and treated her kindly all night. She teared up multiple times and thanked him for being so understanding. We're not back to where we were, and I don't think we ever will be, but we're talking again. Slowly, cautiously. The other night, she texted me a photo of the two of us from college with the caption, "Trying to earn my best friend badge back." I didn't reply right away. I just stared at it and realized that sometimes, forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let the pain define what comes next. Ryan says he's proud of me for handling it with grace. I told him I'm just tired, but deep down, I think I'm also hopeful. Maybe friendships, like marriages, can survive the wreckage if both people are willing to rebuild from the truth. And if not, at least I know I tried. Final update. Closure came in a way I never expected. It's been almost a full year since Lauren first texted me asking if we could talk, and so much has changed that it feels like I'm living in a completely different life now. I didn't think I'd write another update, but after what happened recently, it feels like the right way to close this chapter. For good. When I last posted, Lauren and I had just started talking again. Things were cautious but civil. We'd meet up every few weeks, usually for coffee or lunch, and mostly kept conversations light. I could tell she was trying hard, asking about work, sending me funny memes like we used to, even texting Ryan to thank him again for being gracious about everything. It wasn't the same as before, but it was comfortable. She was still living with her sister then. From what she told me, her marriage to Evan had completely fallen apart within 6 months. The break, she mentioned, turned into a separation, and then eventually divorce papers. She admitted that she'd ignored a lot of red flags while planning the wedding. Small things like him isolating her from certain friends, getting defensive whenever someone disagreed with him, and constantly needing to control how people perceived him. It broke my heart to hear it. Not because I still had lingering resentment, but because I could tell she was broken in a way that went deeper than embarrassment or regret. It was the kind of exhaustion that comes from realizing you built something on a foundation that was never real. Over time, our conversations became more vulnerable. She opened up about how lonely she'd felt after the wedding, how people she thought were friends drifted away once she wasn't the bride anymore, and how she'd replayed our last fight 1,000 times in her head. She said, "You were the one person who always told me the truth." I didn't realize how rare that was until I was surrounded by people who only told me what I wanted to hear. That one hit me hard. Slowly, I started to forgive her, not just in words, but in how I felt when I was around her. The tension faded, the awkward pauses disappeared. It wasn't instant, but I began to see glimmers of the old Lauren again. The funny, impulsive, bright person I'd shared dorm rooms and road trips with. About 3 months ago, she invited Ryan and me to her sister's house for a small cookout. It was the first time all 3 of us were in the same room since the original fallout. I was nervous, but it turned out to be genuinely nice. Lauren was relaxed, laughing easily, and even joked about the whole husband uninvited situation. She looked at Ryan and said, "You know, I should have just let you roast marshmallows at the wedding and called it even." Ryan smiled and said, "Well, if you ever get married again, I expect an invitation and a +1. Everyone laughed. And for a moment, it felt like the heaviness of everything that had happened finally lifted. It wasn't about pretending it didn't happen. It was about acknowledging it, owning it, and still choosing to move forward anyway. In the weeks that followed, Lauren seemed to come back to life. She found a new job at a nonprofit, started therapy, and even began hiking again. Something she hadn't done since college. She texted me one morning from a trail, a selfie with the caption, "Trying to remember who I was before I lost myself." And she did remember, bit by bit. Then, last month, she surprised me by showing up at my doorstep with a small box. She said, "I have something for you." Inside was a framed photo of the 2 of us from my wedding day. Me in my dress, her holding my veil up while laughing. Underneath, she'd written, "A reminder of the day I got to celebrate love the right way." I cried. Like, ugly cried. That was the moment I realized I wasn't angry anymore. All the resentment, the bitterness, the hurt, it was gone. In its place was something softer. Something like understanding. Lauren and I aren't inseparable like we once were. I don't think we ever will be. But our friendship now feels more real. Stripped of illusion. Grounded in honesty. We've seen each other at our worst and somehow still found our way back to something good. She's doing better now, still healing, but stronger. She even joked that she's in her self-love era and refuses to date anyone who can't handle her being honest. I told her that's the best kind of revenge. Becoming someone even a bad marriage couldn't destroy. As for me, I've learned that forgiveness isn't a one-time act. It's a choice you make over and over, especially when it comes to people who've held a place in your heart for years. A few days ago, we met for coffee like old times. She mentioned that she might move out west to start fresh. I smiled and said, "You deserve that. Just promise me one thing. If you ever get married again, I better get that +1. She laughed and said, "You and Ryan are standing up there with me next time. Non-negotiable." I don't know if she meant it literally or just symbolically, but either way, it felt like the perfect full circle moment. We started this whole saga with an uninvitation, and ended it with a promise that if love comes back around, we'll both show up for it. Together. I guess that's what real friendship is. Not perfection, not constant closeness, but coming back when it matters, and this time, I think we both finally got it right. Stories number 3. My grocery trip turned into a full-blown meltdown. Because a stranger thought I was ignoring her. It's funny how the most random, ordinary moments end up sticking with you. Not because they're beautiful, but because they make you question how people can be so completely unhinged in public. This whole thing happened a few months ago, and honestly, it still lives rent-free in my brain. It was a Sunday morning. I had just rolled out of bed after a night of barely any sleep. You know that weird, half-dreamy fog where you're kind of awake but not really? Yeah, that was me. My husband, Matt, had taken our dog, Murphy, to the park, and I realized we were out of milk and coffee filters. A tragedy in our house, so I decided to run to the grocery store real quick. I didn't bother changing. I was literally in my old flannel pajama pants, a faded t-shirt and slippers, hair in a messy bun, no makeup, puffy eyes. Basically, I looked like I'd just escaped from a hibernation cave. When I got there, it was blissfully quiet. Only a few early birds, mostly older people who nodded politely as they passed. I grabbed a basket, put in the essentials, milk, filters, bananas, and a random pint of ice cream because I was already at that point in my weekend. Everything was normal until I got to the self-checkout line. That's when she appeared, this woman, maybe in her late 50s, wearing one of those puffy floral jackets and sunglasses inside the store, was standing a few feet away, looking like she was waiting too. I didn't think much of it. I was kind of zoned out, scrolling through my phone while waiting for one of the machines to open up. Then, out of nowhere, she mutters something like, "Well, I guess some people think they're too important to acknowledge others." I thought maybe she was talking on the phone. I didn't look up. My brain wasn't fully on yet. But apparently that was the wrong move, because the next thing I know, her shopping cart slams into the back of my legs. Not a little nudge, a full-on shove. Enough to make me stumble forward and drop my phone. I turned around in pure disbelief. My brain lagging like a bad Wi-Fi connection. "Excuse me?" I said, trying to figure out if this was some kind of accident. She crosses her arms, glaring at me through her ridiculous sunglasses and says, "I've been talking to you. You've ignored me 3 times now. It's extremely rude." I blinked. "I'm sorry. I didn't hear you say anything," she scoffed. "Oh, please, don't act innocent. You young people are all the same. Too busy on your phones to show a little respect." At this point, I was still half in shock, half mortified because everyone around us had turned to look. I could feel my cheeks burning. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I wasn't trying to be rude. I didn't hear you." But she wasn't having it. "You looked right at me. I asked if you were in line. You ignored me. Then you stood there like you owned the place. Now here's the kicker. I was in line. There was a big yellow 'Please wait here' sticker on the floor, and I was literally standing on it. She was behind me, about 2 feet back. I said, 'Yes, I am in line. There's a spot marked here.' She made this dramatic 'oh my god' gesture, threw her hands up and said, 'Unbelievable. This generation has no manners. You think walking around in your pajamas gives you a free pass to treat people like garbage?' That's when something in me snapped. I wasn't even angry yet, just stunned at how someone could spiral this hard over absolutely nothing, lady. I said, 'You just rammed your cart into me because I didn't respond to a conversation you had with yourself.' Her mouth dropped open like I'd slapped her. She said, 'You have no right to talk to me like that.' And before I could respond, she shoved the cart again. This time, it hit my ankle hard enough that the metal edge left a red mark. That was when the store clerk, a teenager named Jenna, bless her soul, came running over. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," she said. Standing between us, the woman goes, "I was assaulted." She just cursed at me. I hadn't cursed once. I just stood there, jaw on the floor. Jenna looked at me like, "Please tell me this isn't real." Another employee came over, a manager, maybe mid-30s, named Caleb. He said, "What's going on here?" Before I could even open my mouth, the lady started pointing at me. She attacked me. She tried to take my place in line and then started yelling when I called her out. Caleb looked at the security camera above us and said, "Ma'am, there are cameras on every checkout station. Do you want us to pull the footage?" You could see her whole demeanor shift in an instant. The bravado drained right out of her. She stammered, I don't need to cause a scene. I expect to be treated respectfully," he said. "And that includes not shoving people with carts. Please step away from the self-checkout area." The woman mumbled something about terrible customer service and stormed off, nearly knocking over a display of potato chips. Once she was gone, Jenna turned to me, wide-eyed, and whispered, "Are you okay?" "That was insane," I nodded, trying to laugh it off, but my hands were shaking. Caleb asked if I wanted to file an incident report, but honestly, I just wanted to pay for my stupid milk and get out of there. When I got back home, I showed Matt the red mark on my ankle, and he was furious. He wanted me to call the store and report her. I didn't even know what her name was, though. What would I even say? "Hi, a random lady in a floral jacket assaulted me because she thought I ignored her." The bruise faded in a few days, but the absurdity of it didn't. I kept replaying it in my head, wondering how someone gets that angry over something so meaningless. Like, was she just having a bad day? Or was she always walking around looking for someone to pick a fight with? A week later, I went back to the same store, and one of the cashiers recognized me. She said, "Hey, that crazy lady got banned for a while. You're good now." Apparently after she left that day, she went to customer service and screamed at them too, accusing them of harboring rude customers. So yeah, she really doubled down on being the villain of her own grocery store saga. I wish I could say I handled it like a total badass. But honestly, I was just stunned and shaky. Still, there was something almost poetic about it. The way she wanted so badly to be seen, to be acknowledged, that she literally rammed her existence into another human being. People always say, you never know what someone's going through. And maybe that's true, but also, some people just need therapy and a hobby. Anyway, I've started wearing real clothes to the store now. Not because I care what people think, but because I realized that if another unhinged stranger decides to pick a fight, at least I'll be ready for it in jeans and sneakers, not cartoon pajama pants. But deep down, I think the lesson I took from that day was simpler. You can't control how other people act, but you can control whether you let them live rent-free in your mind. And as for the lady in the floral jacket, she's long gone, but I still hope one day she finds whatever piece she's clearly missing. Because no one who's happy goes around weaponizing a grocery cart over a misunderstanding. Update. I ran into the cart lady again, and it went way different than I expected. It's been a few months since the whole grocery cart assault fiasco, and I honestly thought that chapter of my life was closed, but apparently, the universe decided it wasn't done with me yet. Because I ran into the same woman again. And I wish I was exaggerating when I say my heart nearly dropped into my shoes when I recognized her. It happened on one of those crisp early fall mornings where everything feels oddly peaceful. I'd started going to a different grocery store after the incident, partly to avoid her, partly because I couldn't look at the self-checkout area without hearing her voice in my head. But that morning, I was running late for work, and the old store was right on my route, I told myself. It's fine. She's probably long gone. I was wrong. The moment I walked in, wearing my office clothes and holding a reusable bag like some kind of redemption arc, I saw her. Same floral puffy jacket, same sunglasses perched on her head, but this time she looked smaller somehow, not physically but in energy. She was standing near the bakery section, squinting at a display of muffins like she was trying to do complicated math. I froze. I had two choices. Walk past her and pray she didn't notice me, or just leave altogether. My anxiety said run, but my pride said no. You're not letting a stranger bully you out of a grocery store forever. So I took a deep breath and kept walking. I made it about halfway down the aisle when I heard, "Excuse me?" It was her voice. I swear my stomach twisted into a pretzel. I turned, already preparing myself for another confrontation. But her tone was completely different this time. Quieter, uneasy. She said, blinking like she wasn't sure if I was real. "You were here a few months ago, weren't you? With the self-checkout thing?" My brain screamed, "Abort mission," but I nodded slowly. "Yeah, that was me." She looked down at her cart, then back up at me, and to my absolute shock, her eyes welled up. "I wanted to apologize," she said, "for what I did that day." I stood there, frozen, because I was not expecting that. She took a shaky breath. "I wasn't in a good place. My husband had just passed away the week before. I'd been at the grocery store every day because I didn't know what else to do with myself. I saw you standing there, and I don't even know what came over me. I was angry at everyone. You just happened to be there. I didn't know what to say." She wasn't making excuses. Her voice was trembling like she'd rehearsed this in her head 100 times. She continued, "They banned me for 2 weeks after that. Honestly, I deserved it. When I saw you just now, I almost walked out, but I didn't want to hide anymore." There was a long pause. Other shoppers were walking by, totally oblivious that this weird emotional movie scene was happening between the muffins and the coffee aisle. Finally, I said, "I appreciate you saying that. What you did really scared me that day, but I get it. We all have moments we're not proud of." Her eyes filled with tears again, and she nodded. "You're being too kind. I still feel awful. I've been trying to do better. Therapy, grief group, the whole thing. Then, like some surreal full-circle moment, she said, 'Can I buy your coffee today? Just as a peace offering?' I didn't really drink coffee from the grocery store cafe, but I said yes. I think we both needed the gesture. We stood there waiting for our lattes. Her with her hands shaking slightly, me still processing the sheer weirdness of it all. She told me her name was Deborah. She'd been married for 31 years. Her husband had died unexpectedly from a heart attack, and she'd gone from a stable, predictable life to complete chaos overnight. "I was angry at everyone," she said softly. "But mostly, I was angry that the world just kept going, people buying groceries, laughing, talking on their phones, like nothing happened. When I saw you ignoring me, it was like confirmation that nobody saw me anymore. That's what really set me off. It hit me right in the gut. I realized that while I didn't owe her forgiveness, understanding her didn't cost me anything either. We talked for maybe 15 minutes, just standing in the corner sipping our coffee. She even laughed once, a small, sad laugh, but it was something. When I finally left, she said, 'Thank you for not yelling at me that day, or today.' I probably would have deserved it," I told her. "Just promise me you'll stop using carts as weapons." She laughed again, genuinely this time, and said, "Deal." That was it. No dramatic ending, no hug, no redemption montage. Just two people who happened to collide at the wrong time in their lives, now acknowledging that maybe it didn't have to define either of them. When I got home, I told Matt, and he didn't believe me at first. "The cart lady apologized?" he said, eyebrows raised. "What is this, a grocery store redemption arc?" I laughed and said, "Apparently." The whole thing left me thinking, though. You never really know what someone's carrying when they lash out like that. I'm not saying it excuses bad behavior. It doesn't. But it does make you realize how fragile people can be when they're lost in their own pain. I still go to that same grocery store now. I've seen Deborah a few times since. We don't talk much, just nod politely when we pass. But every time I see her, I think about how close we both came to letting a single awful moment define us forever. Now, instead of remembering her as the lady who shoved a cart at me, I think of her as the woman who was grieving and trying to make amends. It's weirdly comforting. Like, maybe not every story has to end with bitterness. Maybe sometimes, the people who hurt you the most end up reminding you what empathy actually looks like. And for what it's worth, I still wear pajamas to the store sometimes, just maybe not the flannel ones. Those have seen enough. Final update. The last time I saw Deborah changed the way I look at strangers forever. It's been nearly a year since that morning when Deborah, Cart Lady, as my friends still jokingly call her, tracked me down in the grocery store and apologized. I honestly didn't expect to ever cross paths with her again. But life has this way of looping things back around when you least expect it. This final encounter happened in early spring. It wasn't at the store, it wasn't planned. It wasn't even in our town. Matt and I had driven about 45 minutes away to visit his cousin, who just had a baby. Afterward, we stopped at this small local farmer's market on the way home. It was one of those cozy community setups. Tents, local honey, flowers, kids running around with lemonade cups. I remember it was windy enough that my hair kept slapping my face, and I was trying to keep Murphy, our dog, from stealing a bite of someone's pretzel. And then, through the crowd, I saw her, Deborah. She looked different, lighter somehow. She was standing behind one of the vendor tables, arranging jars of homemade jam. Her floral jacket was gone, replaced by a pale blue cardigan and a name tag that said, Deborah's Kitchen, locally made preserves. It took me a second to process. For a moment, I wasn't even sure it was her. She looked happy, genuinely, peacefully happy. Matt noticed I'd stopped walking and asked, "What's up?" I said, "That's her." He blinked. "Who?" "The cart lady." His face twisted into a mix of confusion and disbelief. "No way, but it was definitely her. She saw me too." I could tell from the way her eyes widened, like she was trying to place where she knew me from. Then recognition hit and she smiled, a real, warm smile, not the tense, defensive one I remembered. She waved me over. I hesitated for a second, then walked up. "Hey," she said. "I thought that was you. I was hoping I'd run into you again someday." "Hi," I said, smiling back. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." She laughed softly. "Yeah. Life's weird like that." Matt hung back with Murphy while Deborah and I talked. She told me she'd moved about a half-hour away, closer to her sister. After her apology that day in the store, she said something in her shifted, like she'd finally stopped running from herself. "I realized I couldn't keep living angry," she said. "I started grief counseling again. Then I joined this little community kitchen group. We make jams, chutneys, all that. I needed something to keep my hands busy, you know?" She gestured to the table, pride shining through her voice. "Now I do this part-time. Turns out I'm actually good at it." I picked up a jar of raspberry lavender jam and smiled. "I believe it. This looks amazing." She blushed slightly. "I don't think I ever told you how much your kindness meant that day. I was so used to people fighting back or walking away, but you stood your ground and still treated me like a person. That stuck with me. That caught me off guard. I'd never thought of myself as particularly profound in that moment. I'd just been too stunned to react. But to her, it had been a turning point. We stood there for maybe 10 minutes, chatting about small things, weather, how Murphy was shedding everywhere, how she'd started taking morning walks again. She looked alive in a way that made me weirdly emotional. Before I left, she reached into a small basket and handed me a jar of blueberry jam. "This one's on me," she said, "for being patient with me back when I didn't deserve it." I started to protest, but she shook her head. "No, really. You helped me more than you'll ever know." That day in the grocery store, it was the first time someone saw past the worst version of me. You have no idea how much that meant. I think that's when it hit me that our story wasn't really about a grocery cart or a confrontation. It was about how fragile people can be, and how one moment of grace, even when you don't mean for it to be, can change someone's whole trajectory. When we finally left, Matt turned to me and said, "You know, I hated that woman for months, but now, I kind of want to root for her." I laughed. "Yeah, me too. The jar of blueberry jam is still in our pantry. I can't bring myself to open it. It feels like a reminder, not of the chaos that started it all, but of how it ended." Sometimes, when I'm standing in line at a store and someone cuts in front of me, or when a cashier looks like they're about to cry after a rough customer, I think about Deborah. I think about how easily a person's breaking point can become someone else's horror story. I'm not saying everyone who lashes out deserves sympathy. Some people really are just jerks. But there's something powerful about meeting anger with calm. Not because you're weak, but because it stops the cycle before it multiplies. That day at the farmer's market, Deborah told me something I've carried with me ever since. She said, "People see your reaction before they see your reason." You reminded me what it looks like to choose a different one. I didn't know how to respond. So I just hugged her. It felt like closure. The kind that doesn't need words. The kind that makes everything that came before it make sense. So, yeah. That's how the story ends. A woman once shoved a grocery cart into my legs because she thought I ignored her. And a year later, that same woman handed me a jar of jam and thanked me for changing her life. If that's not proof that the world's full of strange, unexpected redemption arcs, I don't know what is. And for what it's worth, I still shop in my pajamas sometimes because now I know. Sometimes the people judging you are just waiting for someone to remind them they're human too. Stories number 4. My boyfriend took me on a romantic date to propose, but ended up turning it into an interrogation about my exes. I've been sitting on this story for months, and I still can't decide if it's hilarious, sad, or just painfully awkward. Probably all three. Anyway, buckle up, because this is the most emotionally confusing date of my life. So, I've been with my boyfriend Jake for almost 3 years. We met in college. We were those friends who slowly evolved into something more. He's always been a little intense, but in the beginning, it came off as passionate and driven. He's the kind of guy who researches everything, plans things down to the minute, and overthinks every conversation. I used to find it kind of endearing. Fast forward to a few months ago. We'd just celebrated our 3rd anniversary, and things were okay. We'd had a few arguments lately, mostly about communication. He can get jealous easily, not the screaming, controlling kind, but the passive-aggressive, quiet kind. Like if I mentioned running into an old male friend, he'd go quiet for the rest of the night and say something like, "I just need to process that." Anyway, one Saturday morning, he texts me saying, "Dress up tonight, I have a surprise planned." Now, Jake isn't usually the surprise type, so I immediately started thinking something big was coming. My friends were convinced he was going to propose. Even my mom hinted at it. I laughed it off, but deep down, I was kind of hoping it was true. That evening, he picked me up in a navy blazer, something he only wears for weddings or important dinners. He even brought flowers. I remember thinking, okay, this is definitely happening. He drove us to this rooftop restaurant downtown, the kind with fairy lights, live music, and tables overlooking the skyline. It was gorgeous. When we sat down, he looked nervous, fidgeting, checking his pocket. I tried to act cool, but my heart was doing backflips. We ordered dinner, made small talk, and everything felt romantic. Then, right as dessert came out, this beautiful little chocolate souffle. He cleared his throat and said, "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." My entire body froze. I swear I stopped breathing. He reached into his jacket pocket, and I saw the glint of a small velvet box. I was seconds away from full-blown tears when he said, "But before I do, there's something I need to know." I blinked. Okay? He opened the box, and sure enough, there was a ring inside. But instead of going down on one knee, he kept talking. "Before I propose," he said, "I need to know that there's total honesty between us. No secrets, nothing left unsaid." I nodded, confused but trying to stay calm. "Of course." He leaned forward, looked me dead in the eye and said, "How many people have you slept with?" I genuinely thought he was joking. I laughed. But then I realized he wasn't laughing. His expression was dead serious. "Jake," I said slowly, "are you serious right now?" He nodded. "I just think if we're getting married, I deserve to know everything. I need to understand who you've been with and what your past looks like." I sat there, completely blindsided. This man had set up a whole romantic dinner, brought me flowers, was holding an engagement ring, and decided that was the moment to conduct a purity interview. I said, "Why does that matter?" He said, "It's not about the number, it's about honesty and transparency. I just don't want to feel like there's something you're hiding." I was trying to process 100 emotions at once. Confusion, embarrassment, anger. The waiter came by to refill our water, and Jake literally lowered his voice and said, "We can finish this after he leaves." I wanted to crawl into a hole. When the waiter walked away, I said, "Jake, I'm not having this conversation over dinner. Especially not like this." He frowned. "So you are hiding something?" At that point, I realized it wasn't about curiosity. It was about control. This wasn't the first time he'd gotten weirdly fixated on my past. But I'd always chalked it up to insecurity. This time, it felt like an interrogation disguised as romance. He kept pressing. I just need to know if there's anything I should be aware of. You've mentioned 2 exes before, but were there more? I stared at him and said, "You're seriously asking me for a body count while holding an engagement ring?" He looked offended, like I was being unreasonable. "I'm just trying to be honest with each other." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Jake, honesty isn't the same as emotional self-surgery. My past relationships aren't an audition tape for your approval. You either trust me or you don't." He sat back, clearly frustrated. "So, you're refusing to answer." "I'm refusing to be interrogated on a night that's supposed to be about love," I said. "If this is what marriage looks like with you, suspicion, tests, and emotional pop quizzes, then I'm out." He didn't say anything for a full 30 seconds, just sat there, looking at me like I'd ruined his big moment. Finally he said, "I just thought we should start our life together with complete openness." I said, "Jake, openness doesn't mean you get to measure my worth by my past." We finished dinner in total silence. I didn't touch the dessert, he paid awkwardly, and then walked me to the car without another word. When we got there, he said, "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I just thought," I cut him off. "Jake, proposing and then interrogating me about exes isn't romantic. It's manipulative." He looked stunned, like he'd never considered that possibility. The car ride home was silent. When he dropped me off, I got out without saying anything. He texted me later that night saying, "I just wanted to make sure I was marrying someone who values honesty." I didn't reply. The next day he came by my apartment to talk. He apologized, sort of. He said he'd gotten carried away and that he didn't mean to make me feel judged. But the thing that stuck with me was what he said next. "I just don't know if I can commit to someone when I don't know what I'm committing to." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't about trust, or honesty, or openness. It was about control, about needing to know everything so he could decide whether I was worthy. I told him I couldn't do it. I wasn't going to start a marriage with someone who saw me as a case file instead of a partner. He tried to argue, saying, "You're overreacting. Every guy wonders about his girlfriend's past," I said. "Then every guy should probably learn how to manage his insecurities before trying to get married." He left. We broke up a week later. At first, I felt awful, like I'd thrown away something real over a single bad night. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that night was the real him, the planner, the tester, the guy who needed reassurance not because he loved me, but because he didn't fully trust anyone. And that's not love, that's fear dressed up as devotion. It's been months now. I haven't heard from him since. I found out through mutual friends that he moved to another city and started a new job. Good for him, honestly. As for me, I'm fine. Better, actually. I've learned that romantic gestures mean nothing if they're followed by emotional landmines. Love isn't about extracting confessions. It's about building trust without needing them. So yeah, my almost fiancé took me out to propose and ended up asking for my sexual history instead. If that's not the biggest romance to horror plot twist you've ever heard, I don't know what is. And the answer to his question, the one I never gave him. He didn't deserve to know. Update. Jake tried, reaching out months later, and it was even stranger, so it's been about 6 months since that disastrous proposal interrogation date, and I honestly thought I'd closed that chapter completely. I moved on with my life, focused on work, friends, and a little self-care. Mostly binge-watching shows I used to share with Jake, just to reclaim them. I even started dating casually again. Nothing serious. Just low-pressure dinners and coffee dates. Life was quiet, which was exactly what I needed. Then, last week, I got a message out of the blue. From Jake, the message read, "Hey, I know it's been a while. I've been thinking a lot about that night and how things ended. Can we talk? I feel like I owe you closure." I stared at my phone for a solid 5 minutes. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately. Part of me, the part that still had lingering curiosity, wanted to know what he would say. I decided to respond cautiously. "I don't know what there is to say, Jake. I think it ended the way it needed to," he replied almost instantly. I feel like I messed up." That night wasn't supposed to go the way it did. I panicked, and I let my insecurities get the best of me. Can we meet? No pressure, I just want to explain myself. I took a deep breath. Normally, I wouldn't even consider it, but something in his tone felt genuine, not perfect, not heroic, but human. So I agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop near my apartment, one of those places with big windows and soft jazz playing in the background. Seeing him in person again was weird. He looked older, more grounded somehow, like he'd actually been doing some thinking. But that nervous energy was still there, the same way he used to fiddle with his hands when he was about to overanalyze something. I took a sip of my latte, bracing myself for an apology that might feel performative. Instead, he started talking in a calm, measured voice. Look, I know nothing I say can make that night okay. I was planning a proposal, sure. But I let fear and insecurity take over. Instead of celebrating our love, I interrogated you. That wasn't fair. It wasn't right. And I get why you ended things. I nodded, trying not to roll my eyes. It was true. But it wasn't new information, he continued. I've been going to therapy since then. I realized I have this pattern. I try to control things I can't control, and I project my fears onto the people I care about. I didn't even realize how bad it was until it blew up with you. I'm not asking for another chance, I just needed to tell you that I'm working on it. I don't want to leave this chapter hanging. And I actually believed him. I really did. Not in a romantic way, God no, but in a human way. He sounded like someone who had faced his mistakes and was trying to grow from them. We sat for about an hour, talking about normal things at first. Work, mutual friends, silly stories from college. Then he apologized again, genuinely, for the way he handled our relationship, for the way he made me feel, for the interrogation disguised as a proposal. It was surreal. After months of replaying that night in my head, analyzing every word and gesture, here he was admitting everything. No excuses, no blame shifting. Just accountability. I didn't hug him, I didn't kiss him. I didn't even say I forgive you. Because honestly, I didn't need to. That's not closure. Closure is realizing that someone can change, and you can move forward without needing them in your life. Before we left, he said, I just hope you find someone who doesn't need to know every little detail to feel secure. You deserve that, I smiled. Thanks, Jake. I already have. Walking out of that coffee shop, I felt lighter than I had in months. It wasn't romantic redemption. It wasn't a happily ever after. But it was real, it was human, and somehow, that made it enough. I think the lesson here is simple. Some people are worth walking away from, not because they aren't human, but because they're not ready to love the way you need, and some people can grow. And it's okay to let that growth exist outside of your life instead of inside it. Jake and I are done, permanently. But I finally feel like I can look back on that ridiculous, terrifying, infuriating proposal date and laugh, and not cry, because in the end, it wasn't about the ring. It wasn't about my exes. It was about recognizing your worth, setting boundaries, and understanding that love isn't a test you have to pass. It's messy, it's awkward, and it's human. And that's exactly how I like it. Final update. How that experience changed the way I see relationships forever. It's been almost a year since that coffee shop meeting with Jake. The one where he apologized for turning a proposal into an interrogation about my exes. Honestly, thinking back on everything now, I realize how much that experience shaped the way I approach relationships today. After Jake, I took some time completely for myself. I focused on my career as a graphic designer, started volunteering at a local animal shelter on weekends, and reconnected with friends I'd been neglecting. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had space to breathe, without someone else's insecurities pressing down on me. Dating again was strange at first. I went on a few casual dates, nothing serious. Nothing that made me feel like I was trying to fix someone or be fixed. But the biggest change I noticed in myself was how I handled red flags. For example, a month after Jake, I went out with a guy named Dylan. He was sweet, funny, and charming, but he made a few passive-aggressive comments about my past relationships. Normally, in the past, I would have laughed it off or tried to reassure him. But this time, I calmly said, "That's not something I'm comfortable discussing. I'm happy to be honest in other ways." but my past isn't a test for your approval." He got the hint, and we moved on to more lighthearted conversation. I realized that setting boundaries early didn't ruin the moment. It preserved it. Beyond dating, I noticed the change in my friendships too. I became more assertive about what I was willing to tolerate and what I wasn't. Arguments that might have dragged on for hours before now ended with a clear, respectful conversation. I started valuing emotional safety over drama or fleeting attention. The weirdest part? I occasionally think about Jake, not with anger or regret, but with a kind of gratitude. That night, the proposal turned interrogation was a wake-up call. It forced me to confront what I truly want from a partner. Someone who trusts me without needing to control me. Someone who communicates openly without turning love into a test. I've also realized something else. People grow, but not always with you. Jake, by all accounts, has been working on himself. I've heard from a mutual friend that he's been seeing a therapist regularly and learning how to manage his jealousy and insecurities. I genuinely hope he continues to grow, even if I'm not part of his life. Meanwhile, I've been dating casually with someone new, Max. He's thoughtful, patient, and curious about me, but not in a way that feels invasive. He asks about my past only when it's relevant to the story I'm sharing, and he respects when I say, "That's private for now." It's refreshing and, dare I say, peaceful. I never knew normal could feel so good. Looking back, that night with Jake taught me a lot. Love shouldn't be a test. Trust is non-negotiable, and your worth isn't determined by your past or anyone else's insecurity. It also taught me that closure doesn't have to come from reconciliation. Sometimes closure is simply walking away, carrying the lessons with you, and choosing to surround yourself with people who meet you halfway emotionally. If anything, I feel empowered. I know what I deserve, and I'm not willing to settle for less. That's a lesson I might not have learned if Jake hadn't taken me on that strange, romantic, terrifying, and ultimately enlightening date. So yeah, my almost proposal date ended with a lot of awkwardness, some anger, and a little heartbreak. But in the long run, it gave me clarity, boundaries, and a new perspective on love. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing because now, I know exactly how to love and how not to settle. Stories number 5, my girlfriend cheated, so I ruined the one thing she cared about. I never thought I'd be the type of guy to pull some petty revenge stunt. I always figured if someone cheated on me, I'd just leave. No drama, no fireworks, just gone. But when it happened, something in me broke in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't rage, it wasn't heartbreak, it was this cold, calm focus that scared even me. I'd been dating Emily for almost 3 years. We met in college, stuck together through graduation, and even moved in together after landing jobs in the same city. I thought we were building a life. We'd talk about where we might live someday, the kind of dog we'd get, stupid little things like that. Emily was always ambitious, way more than me. She worked in marketing for this boutique clothing brand that was growing fast. She loved that job more than anything. She lived and breathed it, sometimes staying up till midnight tweaking ad campaigns or answering emails. I used to admire it, but after a while, that admiration started to fade into something else. Distance. She started traveling for work trips more often. At first, I didn't think anything of it. She'd always been the kind of person who needed space, and I respected that. Then one day I noticed she changed her phone password. That was new. She laughed it off when I asked, saying her boss told her to do it for security reasons. I let it go. A few weeks later, she came home from a trip to Chicago acting weirdly distant, like she was there but not there. I'd ask about the trip, and she'd give one-word answers. That night, she said she was too tired for dinner and went straight to bed. While she was asleep, her phone lit up on the nightstand. Just once, a message preview. It said, "Wish you were still here, Em. Last night was perfect." I didn't touch the phone. Didn't wake her up, didn't say a word. I just sat there, staring at the screen for what felt like hours. The next morning, I got up early, made coffee, and acted like nothing was wrong. I went to work, smiled at people, sat through meetings, all while that text burned through my brain. That night, she came home, kissed me on the cheek, and told me she had to catch up on some work stuff. I said, "Cool, I'll be in the living room." I watched her walk into the bedroom with her laptop and shut the door. I didn't confront her. Not yet, I wanted to know. Over the next few days, I started piecing things together. Receipts, travel itineraries, little details she'd slip up on. She wasn't just cheating. She was seeing her coworker, Tyler. The same guy she used to complain about for being too flirty. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry. I just stopped caring about her in that way. What replaced it was something colder and sharper. I knew what she cared about most, her career, that marketing job. She'd do anything to protect it, to look perfect in front of her boss, Lisa, and the company's founder, who treated her like a golden child. So I did what she would never expect. One night, she left her laptop open while she was in the shower. I wasn't planning anything at that exact moment, but when I saw it sitting there, unlocked, with her work email open, something in me clicked. I started reading through her messages with Tyler. They weren't just flirty. They were explicit, and worse. She'd been sending company data to his personal email, stuff she wasn't supposed to share. Marketing reports, unreleased designs, early product photos, all for him to help her with presentations. I copied everything. Every email, every attachment, every message. Then I made an anonymous email account. I wrote a short, professional-sounding note and sent all of it to Lisa, her boss. I didn't add any drama. Just the facts, screenshots, timestamps, attachments. Then I waited. The next morning, Emily left for work like normal. Around noon, I got a text from her. "I'm coming home." No emojis, no explanation. She walked in an hour later, pale as a ghost. She didn't say a word, just went to the bedroom and shut the door. I heard her crying, then yelling into the phone. Turns out the company had suspended her. The data sharing violated confidentiality agreements. Tyler got fired on the spot. She was under review for days. She tried to figure out who ratted them out. I just played dumb, comforted her, told her maybe it would blow over. It didn't. A week later, she got an official termination letter. She was crushed. She'd worked her whole life to build that career. And in a matter of days, it was gone. When she finally looked at me and said, "I don't know what I'm gonna do," I just said, "Maybe this is karma." That's when she knew. The look in her eyes. That instant where realization hit. I'll never forget it. She screamed at me, called me a psycho, said I'd ruined her life. I told her she ruined it herself. She packed her things and left that night. That was 6 months ago. I haven't heard from her since. Sometimes I think about whether I went too far. Maybe I did. But then I remember how small I felt that night I saw that text. How she looked me in the eyes every day after that and lied like it was nothing. I didn't want revenge at first. I just wanted the truth, but once I had it, I realized something. Sometimes justice isn't about screaming or fighting. It's about taking away the one thing they can't live without. The thing they chose over you. She chose her career, so I made sure it was gone. And I never looked back. Update. She found me again. It's been a little over 6 months since everything went down with Emily. For a while things were quiet. Too quiet. I'd blocked her number, deleted all her social media, even moved apartments. I wanted a clean slate. I got a new job, focused on myself, started running again. Honestly, I thought that was the end of the story. Then last month I got an email from an unknown address. The subject line was just, "You won." I knew immediately it was her. I didn't even need to open it. But of course I did. The message was short. She said she'd found another job, but it paid less than half of what she used to make. That everyone in her old industry had heard about what happened, and no one wanted to take the risk of hiring her. She said she hated me for what I did, but she hated herself more for letting it happen. Then she said something that stuck with me. "You didn't just ruin my career. You made me see what kind of person I became." I didn't respond. I didn't want to open that door again, but I won't lie. Reading that hit me harder than I expected. A week later, I ran into someone I never thought I'd see again. Lisa, her old boss. I was grabbing lunch downtown when she walked in. She recognized me right away. We made small talk, and then she said, "I always wondered if it was you who sent those emails." I didn't answer. She gave me this knowing look and said, "For what it's worth, you did the right thing." She was taking advantage of everyone. Then she added, "But you must have loved her a lot to go that far." That part stung. After that, I started thinking about how much of my life I'd built around anger. For months after everything, I told myself what I did was justified, that it was justice. But sitting there, talking to Lisa, I realized I'd never really let go. I'd just replaced heartbreak with vengeance and called it closure. Then, 2 weeks ago, Emily showed up at my apartment. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was watching a game, half asleep on the couch. When I heard the knock, I opened the door, and there she was. Same messy hair, same green eyes, but smaller somehow, not physically. But like the energy she used to have was gone. She said she'd been in town visiting her sister and wanted to talk. I told her I didn't think that was a good idea. She said, please, just 5 minutes, so I let her in. She didn't waste time. She said she'd lost almost everything after getting fired. Her apartment, her car, even some friends who sided with Tyler. She said Tyler tried to get her to move with him to another state, but she refused. He ghosted her a month later. She said she spent the last few months in therapy, trying to figure out why she cheated. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She just wanted me to know she finally understood what she'd done. Then she said something I didn't expect. You were right to destroy me. I deserved it. That's when I stopped her. I told her I didn't do it to destroy her. I did it because I couldn't stand the idea of her getting away with it. She nodded and said, and that's why it hurt more. Because I knew you'd never scream or beg. You'd just quietly take everything from me. We sat in silence for a long time. I didn't know what to say. Eventually she stood up, wiped her eyes, and said she was leaving town for good, moving back to Ohio to stay with family. Before she left, she turned around and said, you were the only person I ever really wanted to impress, and I ended up proving you right about me. Then she was gone. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I missed her. I didn't, but because I realized how much power I'd given that whole situation over my life. For months, I'd been living in this mindset that revenge equals closure. But seeing her like that, it didn't feel like victory anymore. It just felt empty. Don't get me wrong, I don't regret what I did. She destroyed my trust, and there were consequences for that. But I also know now that holding on to that anger made me just as stuck as she was. A few days after she left, I opened her email again, the one that said you won. I typed out a response and sat there staring at the blinking cursor for a long time. All I wrote was, no one won, then I deleted it, because the truth is, that chapter is over. I'm not the same person I was when it started. I'm finally ready to let it end. Final update, 1 year later. I finally understand what really happened. It's been almost a year since Emily showed up at my door that day. I didn't realize that would be the last time I ever saw her. After she left, life went on, slowly at first, the kind of slow where days blur together and you start to forget what used to matter. I threw myself into work, took on more projects, started spending weekends hiking or going out with coworkers. For the first time in a long time, I was living for me. At first, I told myself that meant I was over it, that I'd moved on, but if I'm being honest, I was still carrying a lot of that bitterness around, like a ghost following me everywhere I went. It showed up in small ways. I didn't trust people easily. I avoided dating altogether. Anytime someone mentioned Emily or cheating, I'd get quiet and change the subject. It wasn't until this spring that something shifted. I met someone. Her name's Sarah. She's not like Emily. Not even close. She's quieter, more grounded. We met through mutual friends at a cookout, and I wasn't even planning to go that day. But she made this dumb joke about how I burnt my burger, and somehow we ended up talking for hours. For weeks, I kept waiting for something to go wrong. That's what happens after you've been betrayed. You stop trusting the good moments. Every time she'd smile at her phone, my brain went straight back to that night. Every time she mentioned a male coworker, my stomach twisted. I hated it. So one night, I told her everything, the whole story. Emily, the affair, the revenge, all of it. I expected her to judge me or pull away. Instead, she just listened. When I finished, she said something I didn't expect. You were hurt. You reacted. That doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you were human. That hit me harder than I thought it would. Because for the first time, someone wasn't treating me like the victim or the villain. Just a guy who went through hell and came out a little more scarred. We've been together 6 months now. It's not perfect. I still have moments where my brain goes dark and I overthink things. But she's patient with me, and that's something I didn't know I needed until now, a few months ago. I got an email from Emily's sister, Megan. I didn't recognize the name at first, but when I opened it, my chest tightened. She said Emily had been doing better, that she found work with a smaller company in Cleveland, living close to family, and that therapy helped her get back on track. Then she wrote, "She doesn't hate you anymore. She actually said what you did forced her to face herself." That was the last I heard. I didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say, but that night, I went for a long drive. No destination, just the highway, and some old music I hadn't listened to in years. Somewhere between mile marker 58 and 72, I realized something, for the first time since this whole mess began. I didn't feel angry, not at her, not at Tyler, not even at myself, just done. The truth is, revenge doesn't give you closure. It gives you silence, and you think that silence is peace, but it's really just the absence of noise. Actual peace takes longer. It sneaks up on you in the form of a morning where you wake up and realize you didn't think about them at all. That's where I'm at now. Sometimes, I still think about that night. The text, the emails, the look on her face when she realized what I'd done. I don't regret it, but I understand it differently now. Back then, I thought I was teaching her a lesson. Maybe I was really just trying to make the pain visible. If I could go back, I don't know that I'd change what I did, but I'd probably walk away sooner. I wasted months plotting, hurting, replaying things in my head when I could have just chosen peace. Now, when people ask if I'd ever take revenge again, I tell them the truth. No, once was enough. Because no matter how right it feels in the moment, revenge doesn't fix you. It just keeps you tied to the person who broke you. I'm finally free of that. These days, my life is quiet in a good way. I wake up next to someone who makes me laugh. I go to work. I come home. I cook dinner. And sometimes I even forget I was ever that guy who sent those emails. I'm not proud of everything I did, but I'm proud of who I became after it. And if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Closure doesn't come when they apologize. It comes the day you stop needing them to. Stories number 6. My dad is angry I won't give his wife my graduation ticket. Graduation is supposed to be one of those big moments where everything feels worth it. The late nights, the panic over exams, the constant doubt, it all leads to walking across that stage. I'd been working toward this for years, and finally it was my turn. The problem is, my dad has found a way to make the entire thing about him and his new wife. I, 22F, am finishing college this spring. It's been a long, exhausting journey, especially since I've been juggling work, loans, and scholarships to make it happen. My parents divorced when I was 13. It was ugly. A lot of shouting, resentment, and cold silences. My mom and I stayed in Illinois, while my dad moved to Colorado, got remarried 2 years later, and basically built a new life. His wife, Melissa, is nice enough. She's polite, sweet on the surface, but she always tries to make every family event about inclusion and blending families. To be honest, I've always felt like a guest in my dad's new life. When I visit, everything is about them. Their house, their dog, their routines. Melissa always calls me sweetheart in this overly sugary tone that feels more performative than genuine. And my dad, who used to be really close with me, just sort of follows her lead. He acts like I'm still part of things, but it always feels like I'm being squeezed into whatever space they have left over. So, graduation. The university only gives each student 2 tickets for guests. You can request extra tickets, but it's not guaranteed. And there are thousands of graduates this year, so I didn't even bother. I knew how slim the chances were. Naturally, my plan was to invite my mom and my dad. That felt fair. They both raised me. They both deserved to see it. When I told my dad, he seemed excited at first. Then he said, "What about Melissa?" I said, "Dad, I only get 2 tickets." He goes, "Oh well, maybe you could try to get 1 more. She's been such a big part of your life these past few years. It would mean a lot to her to see you graduate." That phrase, a big part of your life, irritated me. Melissa and I have never been close. I see her maybe twice a year, and we text occasionally about birthdays. That's it. I didn't want to be cruel, but I also didn't want to lie, so I said, I'd rather have just you and Mom there. His face fell immediately, even through the phone. He said, so you're excluding my wife? You know how that'll make her feel? I told him it wasn't personal, but it's my graduation, and I wanted my parents there. The two people who actually raised me. He said, Melissa and I have been married for 8 years. Ellie, she's family, I replied, and Mom's my family too. But she's not asking to bring her boyfriend. That's when he got angry. He said I was being disrespectful, immature, and petty, that Melissa had always treated me like her own, and that it hurt him to see me punish her for loving him. I just sat there stunned. I told him, again, that I wasn't punishing anyone. There were 2 tickets. 2. I can't conjure a third one out of thin air. He didn't like that answer. He told me that if Melissa wasn't invited, he wasn't coming either. I honestly thought he was bluffing. But when I sent out the official ticket assignments a week later, one for Mom, one for Dad, he sent me a long text. It said, I can't believe you'd intentionally exclude the woman who's been there for me through everything. I'm disappointed in you, Ellie. If Melissa isn't welcome, neither am I. And that was it. I didn't respond for a few days. I was angry and hurt and trying not to cry at work. Eventually I wrote back, I'm sorry you feel that way, Dad, but this is my day. You're still welcome. I love you. He never replied. My mom, who's generally the calmest person in the world, told me not to take it personally. She said, your dad's choosing his pride over his child. That's on him. Still, I couldn't shake the guilt. Maybe I should have tried harder to get another ticket. Maybe I should have just given him both and told my mom to watch the live stream. But I couldn't stomach that either. She's been my rock for years. The ceremony is next week. Mom already booked her flight and hotel. She's been talking about it non-stop, buying a new outfit, crying every time she brings it up. Meanwhile, my dad hasn't spoken to me in a month. Last night, I got a text from Melissa. I debated even opening it, but curiosity won. It said, Hi Ellie, I know things have been tense, but I just want you to know your dad loves you very much. I don't want to cause drama, but it's really sad that I won't get to see you walk the stage. I've been rooting for you all these years, and it hurts to be shut out. Please reconsider. I stared at it for so long. I almost typed out a response like, you've been rooting for me from a distance. But I didn't. I just put my phone down and cried. It's not even about the ticket anymore. It's about the constant need for me to make things fair in a situation that never was. My dad left, remarried, and now expects me to play happy family every time it's convenient. But when it's something for me, suddenly I have to think about their feelings again. It sucks. Part of me wonders if I should have just tried harder to get that third ticket, just to keep the peace. But the other part, the part that's tired of bending, knows that this isn't about peace. It's about control and guilt, and me being the one who always has to compromise. I don't want to resent my dad, but it's hard not to. He chose his wife's comfort over his daughter's milestone, and that choice says everything. Graduation's next Friday. I'll walk across that stage with my mom cheering for me, and maybe my dad will be watching the live stream from somewhere in Colorado. I hope he is. I hope he still feels proud, even if I'll be walking without him there. I didn't want to lose my dad over a ticket. But maybe that's just how fragile our relationship really was. Maybe it was never about a piece of paper or a seat in the crowd. Maybe it was about the years of pretending things were fine when they weren't. Either way, I'm going to walk that stage, and for once, it'll be for me. Update, it's been about 3 weeks since graduation, and I honestly didn't expect to be writing anything about it. But a lot happened, and it's still sitting heavy in my chest. Graduation day came and went. I tried so hard to stay focused on the good parts. My mom was there, crying before I even walked the stage. My best friends from school, Nora and James, were waving from the crowd with a sign that said, Ellie did it, in neon letters. I smiled so much that my cheeks hurt, but the truth is, I kept glancing toward the section where my dad was supposed to be sitting. There was an empty seat next to my mom, because I couldn't bring myself to give the extra ticket to anyone else. I don't even know why. Maybe part of me still hoped he'd change his mind, that he'd show up at the last second. Walk down the aisle with that dumb grin he always had at my old school plays. He didn't. After the ceremony, my mom hugged me so tight that I could feel her shaking. She whispered, "I'm so proud of you, baby." And I cried right there in front of everyone. We went out for dinner afterward with Nora and James, and it should have been one of the happiest nights of my life. But the entire time, I kept checking my phone, waiting for something from my dad. A text, a missed call, anything. Nothing came. The next morning, though, I woke up to a Facebook post. It was from Melissa. A photo of my dad and her having dinner somewhere fancy, both dressed up. The caption said, "So proud of my amazing husband for standing by his values and teaching integrity. Family doesn't mean giving in to guilt. It means love, respect, and honesty." It was like a slap. The timing, the wording. It was all too obvious. People I barely knew from my dad's side of the family were liking it, commenting hearts and "so true" under it. I felt humiliated and angry. I didn't reply publicly, but I did text my dad that night. I said, "I saw Melissa's post. I'm really disappointed, Dad. You weren't teaching anyone a lesson. You just missed my graduation." He didn't reply for a couple days, and when he finally did, it was short. "You made your choice, Ellie. Actions have consequences. Melissa didn't deserve to be excluded. I hope you understand one day." That was it. I showed the text to my mom, who just sighed and said, "He's rewriting what happened in his head so he doesn't feel guilty." And she's right. My dad has always been like that. When something hurts him, instead of facing it, he reimagines it until he's the victim. A few days later, my grandma, his mom, called me. She said she didn't want to take sides, but that my dad was heartbroken and that Melissa had been crying because she just wanted to be part of my big day. I told Grandma that I understood, but it wasn't fair to blame me for something I couldn't control. I only had 2 tickets, and it's not like I invited a bunch of friends instead, Grandma said quietly. "I know, honey, but you know how your father gets when he feels rejected." And that's the word that really stuck with me. Rejected. Because for once, I think I stopped being the version of me he could control. I didn't cave to the guilt. I didn't rearrange my life to keep the peace, and that's what he couldn't handle. About a week after that, he finally called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was calm, too calm. He asked how the ceremony went. I told him it was beautiful, that Mom cried, that I wished he'd been there. He said, "I wish that too, but I had to make a stand." I asked, "A stand for what? Not being one of the 2 people who raised me? Not showing up for your kid because your wife's ego couldn't handle it?" There was silence for a long time. Then he said, "Ellie, you're being unfair. Melissa just wanted to support you. I couldn't choose between you," I said. "You did, though." He didn't argue. He just said, "Maybe someday you'll see this differently." And then he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, shaking. I think that was the moment it really hit me. I can't fix this. I can't keep trying to be the glue that holds a one-sided relationship together. I've always been the one reaching out, the one smoothing things over, the one forgiving first. But this time, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't forget his birthday or say something cruel. I just stood my ground, and somehow that's worse in his eyes than anything else. Mom told me later that this might actually be the start of something good. Not the loss of my dad, but the start of me setting boundaries, she said. "You've been carrying that emotional weight for too long. It's okay to let him carry his own. So I've decided to take some space. I'm not blocking him or cutting him off, but I'm done trying to fix things that he keeps breaking." I kept that empty seat ticket from graduation. It's sitting on my desk now, pressed between 2 books. It feels symbolic. A reminder that love doesn't always fill every seat you hope it will. Sometimes it just leaves one open, and that's okay. Because the people who really love you, they show up, even if there's only 1 ticket left. Final update. It's been about 4 months since graduation. And honestly, life feels like it's finally settling into something that resembles peace. Even if that peace came with a lot of grief first. After my last update, I went mostly no contact with my dad, not out of spite, but because every conversation left me feeling like I was standing on shifting sand. He'd say things like, "I miss you," then turn around and post photos of family dinners with Melissa and her kids, captioned with things like, "Found my real family." It was like emotional whiplash. He wanted me to reach out, But every time I did, he'd twist the knife a little deeper. About a month after graduation, I got a letter in the mail. Not a text, not an email. An actual handwritten letter from my dad. It started out okay, talking about how proud he was of me, how he wished things had gone differently, and how it broke his heart not to see me walk the stage. But halfway through, it turned into something else entirely. He wrote, "You'll understand one day what it's like to be caught between the woman you love and the daughter you raised. I wish you could have been more compassionate toward Melissa. She's been through a lot too." That line, "You'll understand one day," hit me harder than I expected, because I realized that's how he sees me, as someone too young, too emotional, too unreasonable to have valid boundaries. In his mind, it wasn't about the fact that he missed my graduation. It was about the fact that I didn't center his feelings while he missed it. I didn't respond right away. I sat on that letter for 2 weeks, rereading it every few days, trying to find something redeeming in it. Eventually, I wrote back. I told him, "I love you, but love isn't about picking who gets hurt least. It's about showing up even when it's inconvenient. You chose to make my graduation about Melissa's feelings instead of mine, and I can't keep pretending that was okay." I also told him that I wasn't cutting him off, but I needed space until he could take responsibility for his part in what happened. Not just the missed graduation, but the way he and Melissa publicly humiliated me afterward. He didn't reply, but I heard from my grandma again a couple weeks later. She said he'd been quiet about the situation, that he told everyone he was giving me time. But she also slipped in that Melissa's feelings were still hurt, because she never meant to start anything. I just thanked Grandma for calling and told her I loved her. I didn't want to get dragged into another guilt loop. Then something unexpected happened. I ran into my dad. I was out at the grocery store near my mom's house when I saw him in the frozen foods aisle. We both froze for a second, no pun intended. He looked thinner, older. Melissa wasn't with him. He gave this small, cautious smile and said, "Hey, kiddo." I didn't run or pretend not to see him. I said, "Hi, Dad." We stood there, making small talk about nothing. The weather, my classes, his job. He asked if I was doing okay, and I told him I was. Then he said, "I wish we could go back to before all this," and I said, "Me too, but we can't." It was quiet for a second. Then he nodded and said, "I know." Before we parted ways, he told me he was proud of me, that even though he didn't understand everything, he respected that I stood up for myself. It wasn't the full apology I wanted, but it was something. That night, I cried harder than I had in months, not because I was sad, but because I finally felt the weight lifting for so long. I've been carrying around this idea that if I just said the right words or waited long enough, my dad would wake up and be the person I remembered from childhood. But he's not that man anymore. Maybe he never fully was, and that's a painful truth to accept, but it's also freeing. Since then, I've been focusing on myself. I moved into my own place with Nora and James, a tiny apartment with peeling paint and bad plumbing, but it feels like home. My mom came over with a housewarming plant, and we laughed about how she's still trying to keep me from killing every succulent I touch. I've started therapy again, too. My therapist said something that stuck with me. Sometimes healing isn't about reconciliation. It's about releasing yourself from the expectation of it. That hit hard, because I think, deep down, that's what I've been trying to do. Release myself from the hope that my dad will be the one to fix things. He might never be. And that's okay. I can still move forward. The last thing I'll say is this. Graduation wasn't ruined, not really, because it wasn't about who showed up. It was about what I accomplished. I worked my ass off for that degree. I made it through everything. The divorce, the emotional guilt, the tug of war between loyalty and self-worth. I made it, and one day, maybe years from now, when I walk across another stage, maybe for grad school, maybe for something else, I'll save a seat again. Not for who should have been there, but for who will be. Because I'm done waiting for people who make love conditional. The next chapter's mine, and for once, it's not written around anyone else's expectations. That feels like freedom. Stories number 7. My husband wants to name our baby after his late girlfriend, and I can't do it. When I first met Jason, I knew he had a past. He was open about it from the beginning. He'd been in a long-term relationship before me, and his girlfriend Anna had passed away in a car accident when they were both in their mid-20s. He didn't talk about her often, but when he did, there was this softness in his voice. It wasn't obsessive or creepy. It was reverent, like someone remembering a part of their life they could never fully let go of. At first, I respected that. I thought it showed depth, loyalty, and heart. It made me feel like he was capable of love. Real, deep love. And I figured that was something I wanted in my life. We dated for 2 years before getting married. I never felt like I was competing with a ghost. Or at least I told myself I wasn't when we decided to start a family. I was thrilled. I'd always wanted to be a mom, and Jason was so excited too. We spent weeks talking about nursery ideas, baby clothes, and of course names. That's when things started to shift. We were sitting on the couch one night tossing around baby names. I threw out a few. Olivia, Grace, Madison. Jason nodded politely, but didn't seem particularly excited. Then he said almost casually, "What about Annabelle?" I remember freezing. It didn't click right away. But after a moment, it hit me. Anna, his late girlfriend's name was Anna, I asked. "Is that because of her?" He looked a little surprised, then said, "Partly. I just think it's a beautiful name. It's classic. I tried to play it cool, but I couldn't shake the feeling." I said, "It feels too close to her name. It makes me uncomfortable." He frowned and said, "It's not the same name. Annabelle is different, maybe technically, but emotionally, it wasn't different at all. That night I barely slept. It wasn't just the name. It was what it represented. I didn't want to name our child after the woman he lost. I didn't want every birthday, every milestone, to be a reminder of someone else's memory. I told him the next day that I didn't want to use any version of Anna's name. He got quiet and said, "You know, she was a big part of my life. This isn't about her. It's about honoring her memory in a small way." That phrase, honoring her memory, made something in me snap a little. I said, "Jason, I'm your wife. We're starting our own family. This should be about us, not you and someone from your past." He looked hurt and said, "You knew I'd lost someone before I met you. That doesn't just disappear." I told him I wasn't asking him to forget her, but naming our baby after her felt like crossing a line. He got defensive and said, "So you want me to erase her completely?" I didn't even know how to answer that. Over the next few days, we barely spoke. It was like this invisible wall went up between us. When we finally talked again, I tried to approach it gently. I told him I understood his grief, but that our child deserved their own name, one unburdened by history. He said, "You act like I'm trying to replace her with our daughter." I said, "No, I think you're trying to bring her back through her." He didn't deny it. That's when I realized how deep it still ran. He'd moved on, married me, planned a future with me. But a part of him was still living in that world where Anna existed. A week later, I found out he'd told his mom about the argument. She called me, saying she thought it was sweet, that he wanted to keep Anna's memory alive. I told her gently that I wasn't comfortable with it. She sighed and said, "You knew what you were signing up for. Honey, he'll always love her." That stung. I didn't sign up to be a placeholder for someone who died. The tension got worse. Every name I suggested, he'd compare it to hers somehow. Anna liked names like that. Anna wanted to name her future kid that. It was constant. Finally, I told him, "If you can't separate your past from our future, then maybe we shouldn't be having a baby yet." He got angry. The kind of quiet anger that sits in the air like smoke. He said I was being cruel, that I didn't understand what it meant to lose someone like that. I told him I might not, but I do know what it feels like to be compared to them. We didn't talk for 2 days. Then he came to me, said he'd thought about it, and maybe I was right. Maybe naming the baby after Anna wasn't fair. I felt relief wash over me. For the first time, I thought we could move forward. A week later, during dinner, he said, "Okay, new idea. How about Elise?" I smiled. It sounded fresh, simple, beautiful. Then he added, "It was Anna's middle name." I just stared at him. I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "What?" "It's her middle name. No one would even know." I realized then that this wasn't about the name. It was about him not being ready to let go, I told him quietly. If you want to have a child that reminds you of her, then maybe I'm not the person you should be having it with. He looked devastated. I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because I finally understood the truth. I can't compete with someone who doesn't exist anymore. I can't spend my life raising a child named after a memory. He slept on the couch that night. The next morning, he left for work early. When he got home, he didn't say much. We've been polite but distant ever since. Sometimes I catch him looking at me like he wants to fix it but doesn't know how. I still love him, but I don't know how to bridge this gap. I'm not angry anymore, just tired. I want to build a family that's ours, not a shrine to someone who came before me, not a tribute to his grief, just ours. And I don't know if he can give me that update. He finally told me the truth about why he wanted to name our baby after her. It's been about 7 months since I first posted. A lot has happened. Some good, some painful, all of it necessary. After that night when Jason suggested using Anna's middle name, things got really quiet between us. Not angry quiet, just heavy, uncomfortable silence that hung around the house like thick fog. We went through the motions of daily life, work, chores, appointments, but we weren't really together. It felt like living with a roommate who knew every piece of your heart but refused to touch it. At first, I thought the silence was progress. I figured he was reflecting, maybe realizing that I wasn't being unreasonable. But the longer it went on, the more I felt like we were both avoiding the real conversation. The one where we'd have to admit that grief and love had become tangled between us in ways we couldn't untangle easily. Then one night it all came out. It was late, maybe past midnight. I couldn't sleep, and I found him sitting in the nursery we'd started putting together. The walls were half painted, soft sage green. He was just sitting there in the rocking chair. Staring at the empty crib, I asked if he was okay. He didn't look at me at first. Then he said, "I used to imagine sitting like this with her." That hit me like a punch to the chest. He started talking, really talking, in a way he hadn't since the beginning of our relationship. He told me that before Anna died, they'd talked about starting a family, that she wanted to name their first daughter Annabelle or Elise, that after the accident, he'd never told anyone, but sometimes he'd dream about that future that never happened. He said, "When we found out we were having a baby, it felt like I was getting a second chance to give her what she never got." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, tears running down my face because I finally understood. All this time, it wasn't about replacing Anna or disrespecting me, it was about unfinished grief. He wasn't trying to live in the past. He was trying to finish something his heart never got to finish. He said, "I know it's wrong, I know this baby is ours, but part of me thought maybe if I named her after Anna, it would mean she didn't die for nothing, that something good came after her." And for the first time, instead of anger, I just felt compassion. I told him, "She didn't die for nothing, but she also doesn't need to be reborn through our child." He nodded, cried a little, quietly, like he was ashamed of it, and said, "I know. I just didn't know how to let go." After that night, things started changing. Slowly, he began going to therapy again, something he hadn't done in years. He asked if I wanted to come with him for a few sessions, and I agreed. Those sessions were brutal at first. He opened up about things I didn't know, like how he blamed himself for the accident because they'd had an argument before she got in the car, how he never said goodbye. Hearing those things didn't make me jealous anymore. It made me realize how deep the wound really was. You can't build something new on top of something that's broken without clearing out the rubble first. For the first time, we started healing together. Not him grieving alone, and not me feeling like an outsider to that grief. By the time I was 7 months pregnant, we started talking about names again. This time, he said, "I want it to be something that feels like us." We made a list. Long talks over dinner, laughing about the ones we both hated, circling the ones we liked. Eventually, we both landed on one. Nora Grace, simple, soft, new. When our daughter was born a few months later, Jason held her in his arms and cried. Not the kind of broken crying I'd seen before, but the kind that looked like release. Like the weight he'd been carrying finally slipped off his shoulders. At the hospital, while she slept in the bassinet, he told me, You were right, she deserves her own name, her own story. He still keeps a photo of Anna in a small frame on his dresser. I've never asked him to take it down, and I never will. It's part of who he is. And that's okay. But when I see him with Nora now, it's clear. He's finally living in the present. There are still hard days, sometimes anniversaries come around, and he gets quiet. But now he talks about it. He doesn't bury it under guilt or nostalgia. He'll say, I miss her, and I'll say, I know, and that's enough. We've found a balance, one built on truth, not ghosts. If you told me a year ago that we'd make it through this, I would have laughed. I thought grief would always be the third person in our marriage. But now, it's just the two of us. Raising this tiny human who has no idea how much healing her existence brought with her. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm rocking Nora to sleep, I look at her and think about how close I came to walking away. And then I look at Jason, quietly humming beside me, and I realize that love isn't about pretending the past never happened. It's about learning how to live with it without letting it steal the future. Final update 1 year later, and finally at peace. It's been about a year since Nora was born, and for the first time, I feel like our family is actually ours. Not haunted by the past, not overshadowed by grief or unresolved feelings. The first few months were rough. Jason was learning how to be a father, and I was learning how to be a mother. But more than that, we were both learning how to communicate without letting old wounds dictate how we reacted. We had therapy sessions together, and while they weren't always easy, they helped us unpack things I didn't even know were still there, like the subtle ways grief had infiltrated our relationship, making him hesitant to fully embrace the present, and making me wary of being erased by the memory of someone who died years ago. One night, about 6 months ago, I was rocking Nora in the nursery. Jason walked in, sat on the edge of the crib, and said something that made me stop mid-rock. I never want her to feel like she has to compete with anyone, he said quietly. I looked up at him, my heart tightening. Me neither, I replied. He nodded and said, I know I can't fix the past. I can't bring Anna back. But I can make sure our daughter grows up knowing she's loved for exactly who she is, not for anyone she reminds me of. That moment felt like a turning point. It wasn't just words, it was a promise, and I believe him. We've developed our own little rituals with Nora. Every morning we read to her together. Jason sings softly while I make breakfast. We take long walks in the park on weekends. And somewhere along the way, the heavy weight of the past lifted, replaced by something lighter. Hope, routine, laughter, and a little chaos that only comes with babies. Jason still keeps a photo of Anna on his dresser. He's never hidden it, and I've never asked him to. I realized long ago that her memory is a part of him, just as my own past is a part of me. But he's learned to live with it instead of letting it control our family. He talks about her occasionally, in quiet tones, when he's alone or in therapy. But those moments no longer bleed into our lives with Nora. They exist in a safe space, and that's enough. I've changed too. I've learned that anger and fear aren't the same as protection. Wanting our child to have a life free from someone else's shadow isn't selfish. It's love. And I've learned how to voice that love without turning it into confrontation or guilt. We had a small celebration last week for Nora's first birthday. A few family friends came over. Jason made a speech that made me cry. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. He spoke about how much he loved her, how much he loved me, and how grateful he was that we'd navigated such difficult waters to be here together. Later that night, after everyone left, I held him in the living room while Nora slept in her crib. I told him, we made it. We really made it. He smiled, a little tired but genuinely happy, and kissed my forehead. Yeah, he said, we did. And in that moment, I finally understood something I'd been resisting for months. Love isn't about being perfect, or forgetting the past, or never feeling pain. It's about showing up every day despite the ghosts, despite the grief, despite the mistakes. It's about building something real with someone who's willing to do the same. I don't know what the future holds. There will be hard days, no doubt. But for the first time, I feel confident that whatever comes, we can face it together, as a family, on our own terms, without letting the past dictate our present. For anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to insist that your family's story is yours to write. And it's okay to love someone while still expecting them to move forward with you, instead of backward, because in the end, our child, our family, our life, it belongs to us, and nothing else matters. Stories number 8. My sister-in-law wants to stay with us for Christmas, but I really don't want her to, I'll be honest. I'm already bracing myself for Christmas this year. My husband's sister just had her first baby 2 months ago, and now she's planning to come stay with us over the holidays. Normally that wouldn't sound like a big deal, but the way she's handling things and what she's expecting from us is a lot. For context, I'm Emily, 34, and my husband, Matt, is 36. We live in Oregon in a 3-bedroom house. 1 room for us. 1 is my home office. I work remotely, and 1 we keep as a guest room. It's not huge, but it's cozy and works for us. Matt's sister, Hannah, is 30, and she recently had her baby, Lily, with her husband, Jake. They live in California, about a 10-hour drive from us. This will be Lily's first Christmas, and everyone's making a big deal out of it. Hannah and Jake were planning to spend it at her parents' place originally, but since her parents are doing some home renovations and said there wouldn't be enough space for a newborn, they suggested she stay with us, apparently. My mother-in-law volunteered our house without checking with us first. Matt got a call from her one evening. "Honey, I told Hannah you'd love to have them for Christmas. You've got the guest room, and it'll be such a special time," he just said. "Sure, sounds good," without even asking me first. When I found out, I wasn't thrilled, don't get me wrong. I love babies, I really do, but I also love my peace and quiet, especially during the holidays when I finally have a few days off work. And Hannah isn't exactly low maintenance. She's one of those people who needs constant reassurance that she's doing everything right. And she talks non-stop about baby sleep schedules, feeding methods, and every little detail. Last time she visited, before the baby, she managed to take over the whole kitchen in half a day. Now, with a newborn, I can only imagine how that's going to go. When I mentioned my hesitation to Matt, he brushed it off. "It's just a few days," he said. "They'll probably be too tired to do much anyway." But that's kind of the problem. If they're exhausted new parents, that means we'll be the ones running around getting meals ready, cleaning up, and trying to make the house baby-friendly. I asked him where they'd put all their baby stuff. Bassinet, diaper bags, formula, stroller, the whole 9 yards, and he just shrugged. "We'll make it work." The other issue is that I use my office daily, even during the holidays. I don't take the entire week off because my company still expects some coverage, so I'll be in meetings and working part-time from home. If they take over the guest room, fine, but if the baby's crying or Hannah's up all night, there's no way I'll get any sleep, let alone focus on work. I suggested maybe they stay in a nearby Airbnb instead, and we could still spend most of the day together. It seemed like a fair compromise, but when I brought that up to Matt, he said it would hurt Hannah's feelings, apparently. She's feeling emotional and wants to be surrounded by family. I said, "Okay, but what about our peace of mind?" He just sighed and said, "It's 1 week, Emily. Can't we just be nice about it?" That line really got under my skin. I feel like I'm constantly expected to be nice at the expense of my own comfort. Hannah is already texting me about how excited she is to stay with us, how she's bringing Lily's playmat and bottles, and asking if we can baby-proof the living room a bit. We don't even have kids. We don't have a single baby gate or cabinet lock. She also asked if we could keep it warm in the house, because Lily gets fussy when it's cold. Except we usually keep the thermostat around 68, not 75. I know it sounds petty, but it's not just about temperature or space. It's the feeling that this whole plan was decided for me, not with me. I feel like a guest in my own home during what's supposed to be a relaxing holiday. A few days ago, I brought it up again with Matt. I told him I don't think this is a good idea. He immediately got defensive, saying I was overreacting and being unsupportive. I reminded him that I've always been polite and welcoming to his family. But I don't think it's fair to have a newborn in the house for a week when no one asked me first. He said, "So what? You want me to tell my sister she's not welcome?" I said, "No, but maybe she should stay somewhere nearby instead." He just shook his head and said, "You're going to make this really awkward. Now I'm stuck. If I stand my ground, I'll look like the bad guy, the uptight sister-in-law who doesn't want a baby around. But if I cave, I'll spend my Christmas listening to a crying newborn, trying not to trip over baby gear, and pretending I'm fine while I'm silently losing my mind. The worst part? My mother-in-law called yesterday to thank me for being so kind about letting them stay, she said. I knew you wouldn't mind. You're always such a good hostess, I wanted to scream. So here I am, trying to figure out if there's a way to backtrack without blowing everything up. I don't want to ruin family Christmas, but I also don't want to resent everyone in my own house. I know Hannah's new to motherhood and probably overwhelmed, but that doesn't mean her comfort should completely override mine. Part of me wonders if I should just let it happen, get through the week, and then make it clear afterward that next year we'll be traveling instead. But another part of me feels like this is exactly how resentment builds, by always being the one to just deal with it. It's early October now, and Hannah's already texting me about Christmas decor and cozy baby corners. She even asked if I could pick up some special detergent because Lily's skin is sensitive. I haven't answered that one yet, honestly. I don't know how to say no without starting a family war. But I also don't know how to say yes and stay sane. Update. I wasn't planning to post an update this soon, but so much has happened since I first wrote that, and I need to get it off my chest. After sitting with it for a few days, I decided to be honest with Matt. I told him flat out that I didn't feel comfortable hosting Hannah, Jake, and the baby for an entire week. I tried to stay calm about it, explaining that it's not personal. I just know what I can handle. And constant crying, clutter, and disrupted sleep, aren't it? I told him I wanted our Christmas to actually feel like a break, not a job. He didn't take it well. He accused me of being cold, and said I didn't understand how hard it is for new parents. He said Hannah needs this visit to feel supported. I asked him if supporting her meant sacrificing our peace and my ability to work from home. He said I was exaggerating. So I tried a different approach. I told him we could still see them every day. Dinners, games, presents. But that maybe they'd be more comfortable at a nearby Airbnb, especially with the baby. I even found a few really nice options within 10 minutes of our house. One of them was a small cabin with a fireplace, and another was a family suite at a local inn that looked adorable. When I showed them to him, he said, "You're treating them like strangers." That stung, I said. "I'm treating them like guests who deserve space and quiet, just like we do." He didn't answer. He just walked away and stayed quiet the rest of the evening. The next day, Hannah called me directly. I could tell right away that Matt had told her something. Her tone was polite, but I could hear the edge in it. She said, "Matt mentioned you're a little stressed about having a baby around. I totally get it. It's a lot. But I promise we'll be easy guests," I said. "It's not that, Hannah. I just think you might be more comfortable somewhere with more space," she said. "Oh, but your mom said you have a guest room, and we'll bring a travel bassinet, so we won't need much." "Lily's such a good sleeper lately," I wanted to say. Every new parent says that until the baby hits a sleep regression. But I bit my tongue. I told her I'd think about it and call her back. After that call, I was fuming. I felt like I was being cornered by this entire family narrative of supportive sister-in-law, while no one cared about how I actually felt. I told Matt that if he wanted them to stay, then he could take responsibility for setting up the house, cooking, and cleaning during their visit. He agreed without hesitation, which honestly surprised me. Fast forward to last week, he decided to prepare early by reorganizing the guest room. He moved my treadmill and office supplies into the living room. Temporarily. I came home from a work meeting to find my stuff piled in the corner like clutter. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Making space for Hannah and the baby." That was the moment I lost my patience. I told him he'd crossed a line. I reminded him that I never agreed to this, and that turning our house upside down 2 months in advance was ridiculous. We got into a full-blown argument. He said I was making everything harder than it needed to be, and I said he was making decisions for both of us without any discussion. We didn't talk for almost a day after that. Then his mom called again, because of course she did. She said she heard there was tension and wanted to smooth things over. Apparently, Hannah had told her she felt unwanted, and my mother-in-law decided to give me a speech about how family comes first, and how I should be more understanding. That was it for me, I told her, as respectfully as I could. That I've always been kind and welcoming, but I won't let people assume I'm a free hotel, I said. It's not my job to fix everyone's plans. She got quiet and said, I didn't realize you felt that way. The next morning, Matt finally admitted that this whole thing had gotten out of hand. He said he didn't like how everyone was piling on me, and that maybe we did need boundaries. It was the first real breakthrough we've had in weeks. We agreed that Hannah and Jake could still come for Christmas, but only for dinner and family activities. No overnight stays. I told him he needed to be the one to tell her that. Not me, he actually did it. He called Hannah and said, hey, we'd love to have you guys over every day, but it's probably not the best idea for you to stay here with the baby. We just don't have the right setup for a newborn. He told her about the Airbnb I'd found, and said we'd even help cover one night if cost was the issue. She wasn't happy, but she didn't explode either. She just said, okay, I'll talk to Jake later. She texted me something short but pointed. No worries, we'll make other plans. Hope it's not too inconvenient to see us during the day, so now it's a little tense. My in-laws are acting polite but distant, and I can tell they think I'm the bad guy. But honestly, I feel relieved. For the first time since this all started, I feel like I can breathe again. Matt and I talked more afterward, and I told him this situation was never about hating his family. It was about not being volunteered into something that disrupts our home and mental health. I think he finally got it. He actually apologized, like, genuinely apologized, and said he should have checked with me before agreeing to anything. He said he's learning that family doesn't mean automatic yes, so that's where we're at. Hannah and Jake are booked into a little Airbnb nearby, and we'll see them for dinners and gift exchanges. I'm already planning the menu and decorations, things that actually make me happy during the holidays. It's still a little awkward, but at least I know I stood my ground this time, and honestly, it feels like the first Christmas in years where I won't be secretly counting the days until everyone leaves. Final update. Christmas is finally over, and I can't even describe the relief I feel. I've been waiting to write this once things settled down because, honestly, it turned out very differently than I expected. Not terrible, but not smooth either, a few days before Christmas. Hannah texted me to confirm their arrival time. She sounded polite but short, like she was still annoyed about the whole Airbnb situation. I tried to keep things friendly, said we were excited to see them, and asked if there was anything Lily needed during the day visits. She said, we'll just bring everything, don't worry about it. They arrived on the 23rd. Matt and I met them at their Airbnb to help unload their car. It was one of those cute cabins with a small kitchen and a stone fireplace. Cozy and actually perfect for a family with a baby. I could tell Hannah didn't want to admit it, but she liked the place. When we went over the next morning for coffee, Lily was in a little Christmas onesie, smiling and drooling. And okay, I'll admit, she's adorable. It was hard not to soften up a bit. Jake was friendly as always, and it helped break the tension. He even thanked us for helping them find the cabin. Said it was nice having their own space after such a long drive. Christmas Eve went surprisingly well. We had dinner at our place. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and a ridiculous number of cookies. Hannah kept insisting she didn't want to be a burden, but she still hovered around the kitchen giving suggestions on how to make the gravy thicker. Classic Hannah. I kept my cool and smiled through it. There were some minor hiccups. Lily got fussy right as we sat down to eat, and Hannah disappeared upstairs with her for almost an hour. Matt tried to keep everyone talking, but the energy got awkward when she came back. She looked frazzled and emotional. She said Lily's sleep had been rough lately, and that she felt guilty for ruining dinner. I told her it was fine and that we were just glad she was here. I actually meant it too. I wasn't pretending this time. Later that night, after everyone left, Matt hugged me and said, "Thank you for handling that so gracefully." That moment hit me more than I expected. All our arguing and stress before suddenly felt worth it, because we'd finally found a middle ground. On Christmas Day, everyone came back over in the morning for presents. Hannah brought cinnamon rolls, Jake brought coffee, and it actually felt nice, like a real family holiday. The baby napped in her car seat near the tree while we opened gifts. My mother-in-law cried when she saw Lily's little handprint ornament. Even I got a bit emotional watching the whole scene. Then came the awkward part. After lunch, Hannah pulled me aside. She said she wanted to clear the air. My stomach dropped. But she was calm, just tired and honest, she said. I was really hurt when I thought you didn't want us here. I felt like I was being pushed away during a really vulnerable time. I told her I understood, and I apologized if it came off that way. I explained that it wasn't about not wanting her. It was about needing space and not being asked first. I told her how overwhelmed I felt when everyone assumed I'd host without checking. She actually nodded and said, "Yeah, Mom kinda put everyone in a weird position." We talked for almost half an hour. It wasn't emotional in a dramatic way, more like two tired women finally being honest. She admitted that staying at the Airbnb turned out better than she expected. She said it was nice to have a place where the baby could cry at 3 a.m. Without waking anyone up, I laughed and said, "Exactly." When she left that night, she hugged me tight and said, "Next year we'll host. You guys can just show up and relax." I almost cried. The day after Christmas, Matt's parents came over for leftovers. And the whole vibe was easy. My mother-in-law, who had been a little cold before, actually thanked me. She said, "I didn't realize how much you do for everyone during the holidays. You made it feel special this year." I don't know if she meant it as an olive branch or a genuine compliment, but either way, I'll take it. When everyone finally went home, the house felt quiet again, but in the best way. No crying, no constant small talk, no mess, just peace. Matt and I sat on the couch with wine that night and talked about how the holidays went. He admitted he'd been too quick to say yes to his family without thinking about me. He said, "You were right about needing boundaries. I see it now." I told him. I appreciated that, and that I wasn't trying to make him choose between me and his family. Just between chaos and sanity. We both laughed at that, so, yeah, things turned out okay. Not perfect. There were still tense moments, but a lot better than I expected. The Airbnb ended up being the best decision we could have made. Everyone got space, sleep, and sanity. And now that it's over, I actually feel proud of how I handled it. It reminded me that setting boundaries doesn't make you unkind. It just makes you human. I love my husband's family, but I love my peace too. And for the first time in years, I got to have both. Stories number 9. My 5-year-old asked why he doesn't have a dad, and I overheard his conversation about it. Sometimes it's the smallest, most innocent moments that break you open. Last week, I overheard my 5-year-old son having a conversation with his best friend, and I still can't stop thinking about it. For context, my name's Laura, I'm 33, and I live in Colorado with my son Noah. He's bright, curious, and just the kind of kid who sees magic in everything. He's in kindergarten this year, and it's been a huge step for both of us. It's just been me and him since he was born. His father, Eric, left when I was about 6 months pregnant. We weren't married, just dating. And when things got serious, he completely freaked out about becoming a dad. He told me he wasn't ready to ruin his life yet, and ghosted me after that. I haven't heard a single word from him since. For years, it's just been me, Noah, and a handful of people who stepped up when he didn't. My parents, my brother, and a few amazing friends. I've always tried to keep things light for Noah. I never talk badly about his father. When he was younger and would ask where his dad was, I'd just say, "It's always been you and me, buddy." He seemed okay with that, until recently. It started last week when Noah's best friend, Ethan, came over for a play date. Ethan's dad dropped him off, and I remember seeing how Noah's eyes followed them from the doorway. Ethan running ahead, his dad laughing, saying something about, "Don't forget your backpack, champ." I didn't think much of it at the time. I set them up in the living room with Legos and went to the kitchen to finish cleaning up. After a while, I heard their little voices talking, and something in the tone made me pause. It wasn't their usual excited chatter. It was softer, more serious. Ethan said, "My dad took me to the park yesterday. We saw ducks." Noah said, "That's cool." "My mom takes me to the park." Then there was a pause, and Ethan asked, "Where's your dad?" Noah said, "I don't have one." The way he said it, so casual, so certain, made my heart ache. Ethan sounded confused. "Everyone has a dad," Noah said. "Not me. My dad didn't want to stay. My mom says it's okay though. I froze right where I was. Dish towel in my hand, just listening. Ethan asked, "Why didn't he want to stay?" Noah said, "I don't know. Maybe he doesn't like me." Those words hit me like a punch. I had to grab the counter because it physically hurt to hear. Ethan said, "My dad likes me. He says I'm his best guy." Noah said, "Yeah, my mom says I'm her best guy too. She's really strong. She fixes stuff. She can do everything." There was a little silence. Then Ethan said, "Maybe your dad got lost," Noah said. "Yeah, maybe. But if he got lost, my mom would find him. She's good at finding stuff." I just stood there, tears running down my face. I wanted to walk in and hug him, but I didn't want to embarrass him. I didn't want him to feel like he'd said something wrong. Later that night, when I was tucking him into bed, he looked at me and said, "Mom, do you think my dad forgot about me?" I tried so hard not to cry. I told him, "No, sweetheart, he didn't forget you. Some people just don't know how to be the kind of grown-up you need. But you are so loved. You have me, Grandma, Grandpa, Uncle Ryan, and a million people who think you're the best kid in the world." He smiled a little and said, "Even if I don't have a dad, I still have a family, right?" I said, "You have a perfect family." He nodded, then said, "Okay, but can I tell Santa to bring me a dad?" That one just broke me. I held it together until he fell asleep, then cried quietly next to his bed. I don't talk much about Eric, but hearing Noah's voice trying to reason through something no child should have to rationalize brought everything back. The loneliness of pregnancy, the fear, the anger, and then the realization that the man who helped create this beautiful, kind little person chose to miss out on him. Over the next few days, Noah kept bringing up dads casually. Ethan's dad helped him build a birdhouse, or James's dad drives a truck. He wasn't whining or upset, just noticing, but it's like I could see the awareness forming in him, that slow realization that our family looks different. It made me start questioning if I've been doing enough. Maybe I've been too casual about it. Maybe I should have had a more direct conversation earlier. I just didn't want to plant pain in him before he could even understand what it meant. I talked to my mom about it a few nights later. She said, "Honey, you can't protect him from wondering, but you can give him the truth in a way that feels safe." So, I sat down with him the next evening and told him the truth. Just enough for a 5-year-old. I said, "Your dad and I used to be friends, but sometimes people aren't ready to be parents. He didn't know how to stay and take care of us. That's not your fault. That's something he decided." "Not you," Noah asked. "But if I saw him, would he know me?" That question wrecked me all over again. I said, "I don't know, baby, but if he did, he'd see what an amazing boy you are." He thought for a second, then said, "If he doesn't know how to be a dad, can Uncle Ryan be my dad instead?" I laughed through tears and said, "You already have the best uncle in the world. I think that counts." The next day, Ryan came over to help me fix a leaky faucet, and Noah ran up and hugged him out of nowhere. He said, "You're like my practice dad." Ryan looked at me, confused, and I mouthed, "I'll explain later." When I told him the story, Ryan just shook his head, eyes shiny, and said, "That kid deserves the world." He's been coming around more since then, taking Noah to the park, playing catch, teaching him little things like tying knots and using a screwdriver. It's made a huge difference. Last weekend, when I picked Noah up from Ethan's birthday party, Ethan's dad was there again, handing out cupcakes. Noah told him, "You're good at being a dad." The man smiled and said, "Thanks, buddy." On the way home, Noah said, "I think when I grow up, I'll be a good dad. I'll never leave my kid." I had to pull the car over because I couldn't see through the tears. It's strange how much love and sadness can live in the same moment. How a 5-year-old's simple words can crack you open and make you grateful all at once. I still think about what I overheard that day, the way Noah said, "Maybe my dad got lost, I guess." In a way he did, but the truth is, Noah never did. He's been found, loved, and surrounded by people who show up for him every single day. And maybe that's what matters most. Update. It's been a few months since that day I overheard Noah and Ethan talking. And honestly, so much has shifted in small, quiet ways. It's strange how one little conversation can change how you see everything, how you parent, how you think, how you carry the past. After I posted the story, I started paying closer attention to how often Noah brings up dads. It's not constant, but it's there, woven into his little comments about school and his friends. He's at that stage where he's becoming more aware of how other families work. He notices when a dad picks up a kid from school, or when families come as pairs to events. And he's starting to ask bigger questions, not in a sad way, just curious. A few weeks after Christmas break, his class had Family Friday, where parents could come read to the class or help with crafts. When the teacher emailed about it, my stomach dropped a little. I knew there'd be a mix of moms and dads, and I could already picture Noah looking around the room, wondering why his looked different. I still went. I sat in one of those tiny chairs, cutting paper hearts with a bunch of 5-year-olds. Pretending my knees weren't screaming, Noah was so happy to have me there, grinning from ear to ear. Then one of the other kids, this sweet but blunt little girl named Lily, asked him, "Where's your dad?" Noah didn't even blink. He said, "It's just me and my mom." She's the boss. The way he said it, confident, proud, made my chest tighten. It wasn't embarrassment or shame this time. It was ownership, his reality, and he was fine with it. After that day, I stopped worrying so much about what other families had. But at the same time, I also realized that it's okay for him to want more people in his circle. Around that same time, my brother Ryan really started stepping into a bigger role with him. He calls him Uncle Rye and thinks he's the coolest person alive. They've built birdhouses, taken apart an old toaster to see how it works, and even planted tomatoes in the yard together. One day I overheard Noah say, "Uncle Rye is like my hero." Ryan pretended to brush it off, but I could tell it hit him right in the heart. Then something unexpected happened. A few weeks ago, I ran into someone from my past at the grocery store. Eric's sister, Megan. I hadn't seen her since I was pregnant. We'd been friends before everything went down, and when Eric bailed, she reached out a few times, but I ignored her then. Seeing her now was surreal. She looked the same kind face, same gentle way of talking. She said, "Laura? Oh my God, is that Noah?" He was sitting in the cart, wearing his little dinosaur hoodie, asking for every cereal on the shelf. I said yes, and she started crying right there in the aisle. She said, "He looks so much like Eric." It was like being hit with a wave I didn't expect. We talked for a few minutes. She told me that Eric moved to Texas years ago, that he got married, no kids. I didn't know how to feel about that. She said she'd thought about reaching out but didn't know if I'd want to hear from her. I told her, "I don't hold anything against you. You didn't do what he did," she said softly. "He made a mistake, Laura, a really big one." When we got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. For the first time in years, the idea of Eric wasn't just a shadow in my head. It was real again. Present. I didn't tell Noah anything yet, but it stirred something in me. That night, I told my mom what happened. She said, "You don't owe that man anything, but someday Noah might want answers. You'll have to decide if you want to be the one to give them." And she's right. Noah deserves truth when he's ready. Not to idealize Eric, but to understand where he came from. The next morning, while we were eating breakfast, Noah asked out of nowhere, "Mom, what was my dad's name?" I froze for half a second. He'd never asked that before. I said, "His name was Eric." He nodded, like he was filing it away in his mind. Then he asked, "Do you think he's nice?" I said, "I don't really know anymore, honey. I think he had a hard time being ready for a big job like being a dad." Noah thought about it, then said, "Maybe he just didn't know what to do. But I'm okay, I got you." That's when I realized something. I've been so scared of what that missing piece might mean for him. But Noah isn't broken because of it. He's not missing anything he can't replace with love that's already here. Still, I've started writing things down, letters. Really, one for every age where I think the questions might get harder. Not because I plan to hand them to him all at once, but because I want to be ready when he starts asking the kind of questions that deserve more than a bedtime answer. And in the middle of all this, something else happened that made me feel like the universe has a sense of humor. A new neighbor moved in across the street. His name's Mark. He's around my age, divorced, with a 7-year-old daughter named Chloe. We've talked a few times in that friendly, neighborly way. Trash bins, mail mix-ups, that sort of thing. Chloe and Noah hit it off instantly. They've been playing outside together every afternoon, building little forts and chasing each other around. Last weekend, Mark invited us to a small neighborhood cookout. Nothing fancy, just burgers and a fire pit. Watching Noah play with Chloe while Mark laughed with them was unexpectedly emotional. Not because I saw some future family picture or anything dramatic like that, but because it was just normal, easy. At one point, Mark handed Noah a sparkler and said, "You got this, buddy?" And Noah said, "Yeah, my mom taught me to be brave." Later that night, when I tucked him into bed, he said, "Mom, I like Chloe's dad. He's funny." Then, almost like an afterthought, he said, "If I ever have a dad one day, I hope he's funny too." That one sentence, simple, hopeful, free of pain, was like sunlight after a long winter. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know if I'll ever date again or if Eric will ever resurface. But I do know this. My son is growing up surrounded by love, laughter, and people who show up. And maybe that's what really defines family. Not who left, but who stayed. Final update. It's been about 3 weeks since everything happened, and I finally feel like I can breathe again. Writing this update feels strange because so much has changed in such a short time. But also, in a way, nothing has. It's still me and Caleb, still our little apartment, still the same bedtime stories and Saturday pancakes. But emotionally, things feel lighter, like I've been carrying this invisible weight for years, and I finally put it down. The night after my last post, I couldn't stop thinking about what Caleb said to his friend, and then again to me. Did my dad not want to stay because of me? That question has echoed in my head every day. It broke something in me. Not in a bad way. More like it cracked something open that I'd been trying to keep sealed for too long. I knew I had to be honest with him, not brutally honest, but enough so that he could stop wondering. So a few days later, after dinner, I told him we could talk about his dad again if he wanted. He hesitated, then nodded. I explained that when he was a baby, his dad, Mark, and I didn't agree on a lot of things, that Mark loved him, but he wasn't ready to be a dad, and that it wasn't anyone's fault. Caleb just listened, quiet, picking at the corner of his blanket. Then he said, "So he didn't leave because of me?" And I said, "No, baby, he left because of him." He crawled into my lap, hugged me and said, "Okay." That was it. That one word carried so much peace. Later that night, I sat in the dark after he went to bed and just cried. I don't think I'd allowed myself to grieve that loss properly before. I've been so focused on protecting him that I forgot to let myself feel everything. Then, something unexpected happened. Mark called, out of nowhere. He hadn't called in over a year. My first instinct was to ignore it, but I picked up. He said he'd been thinking about Caleb a lot, and he wanted to know if he could send him a Christmas gift. I was caught off guard, but I said yes, as long as it was something simple and appropriate. He ended up sending a box with some dinosaur puzzles, a couple of books, and a handwritten note that said, "I'm sorry I've been gone so long. I hope you're doing great, buddy." When Caleb opened it, he froze for a second, then he smiled and said, "He remembered I like dinosaurs." That was it. He didn't cry or ask questions, just smiled and ran off to start a puzzle. I don't know what's going to happen from here. I don't expect Mark to suddenly show up or be the father I used to hope for. But maybe this is a step, maybe it's not. Either way, I'm not doing this for me anymore. I'm doing it for Caleb's peace of mind. On the personal side, I've realized how strong our little family is, even if it's just the two of us. I used to feel like something was missing, but now I don't. We have a rhythm, a warmth, a love that's enough. The world tries to make single moms feel like they're not complete, but that's a lie. I look at my son, smart, kind, funny, and I know we're doing just fine. A few days ago, I overheard him and his friend talking again. Same topic. His friend said, "My dad took me fishing last week. Maybe your dad can come next time." Caleb just shrugged and said, "It's okay. My mom takes me to the park instead. She's good at it." That moment hit me like a wave. He wasn't sad or embarrassed or confused. Just content, so that's where we're at. Life isn't perfect, but it's peaceful. I'm learning to let go of the bitterness. To forgive, not for Mark's sake, but for mine and Caleb's. Because I don't want my son growing up watching me carry resentment like it's part of who I am. I want him to see strength, not anger. The funny thing is, after everything, I realized that the conversation I overheard wasn't something to dread. It was something I needed. It forced me to face the truth. Not just about Caleb's questions, but about my own fears. I wasn't afraid of him not having a dad. I was afraid of failing him alone. But I haven't. He's happy, he's loved, and that's enough. I think that's all any kid really needs. Stories number 10. Is it the wife's responsibility to make her husband's lunch, even when she's working too? I've been married to my husband, Ryan, for almost 7 years. We're both in our 30s. No kids yet, and we both work full-time. I work as a nurse, and he works in construction management. His schedule is pretty demanding. Out the door by 6,000 RA, sometimes home after 6 p.m. My hours change depending on shifts, but I still pull long days and nights too. This all started over something that seems small, but it's been growing into something bigger. Packing lunches. For the first few years of our marriage, I did it, mostly because it was easy and felt like a caring gesture. I'd make sandwiches, prep leftovers, toss in a drink, a snack, and a note sometimes. He'd say thank you, and it made me feel good. Back then, I was working part-time and had a more flexible schedule, so it never bothered me. But about a year ago, I switched to full-time. My schedule got hectic. I'd come home exhausted after 12-hour shifts, shower, eat something small, and collapse into bed. On top of that, I still handled most of the cooking, cleaning, and errands. I never really noticed how much it was until I started burning out. One morning, I woke up late for a shift and was rushing to get out the door when Ryan asked, "Hey, did you make my lunch?" It stopped me cold. I looked at him and said, "No, I didn't. I'm barely making it out the door myself." He kind of sighed and muttered, "Guess I'll just grab something at the gas station." It wasn't a fight then, but something about his tone got under my skin. It felt like disappointment, like I'd failed some silent expectation. Later that day, I kept thinking about it. Why was it automatically my job? That night, I brought it up calmly. I told him I'd been feeling overwhelmed and asked if he could start packing his own lunches. He looked surprised and said, "You've always done it." "I didn't think it was a big deal," I said. "It wasn't before, but it is now. I'm tired, Ryan. I work as much as you do." He didn't argue right away, but I could tell he didn't like it. For the next week, he packed his own food. But with this passive-aggressive energy, he'd make comments like, "Guess my sandwich isn't as good as yours," or "Didn't realize how much effort it takes." I tried not to react. I thought he'd adjust. Then last weekend, we went to his parents' house for dinner somehow. This topic came up. His mom asked if I'd still been making his lunches since I started working more. Before I could answer, Ryan said with this joking tone, "Nah, she retired from that job." His mom laughed, but then said, "Oh honey, you should take care of your man." A homemade lunch shows love. I smiled politely, but inside I wanted to crawl out of my skin. I didn't want to start anything at the table, so I just said, "Well, love also means letting your partner sleep once in a while." His dad chuckled, but his mom looked disapproving. The next day, Ryan told me he didn't appreciate me snapping at his mom. I told him I didn't appreciate being thrown under the bus. He said he didn't mean it like that it was just a joke. I told him it wasn't funny to me because I felt like he, and now his family, saw this as something I owed him. He said, "You make it sound like I expect you to serve me." "I don't," I said. "Then why do you keep bringing it up?" He didn't have an answer. For the past few weeks, it's been tense. He's still packing his own lunches, but there's this weird distance between us. We used to be playful, but now it feels like every little household thing has a hidden layer of resentment. Like if I cook dinner, he acts extra grateful in this sarcastic way, like, "Wow, thanks for taking care of your man tonight." I can't tell if he's joking or being petty. I tried to talk to my sister about it, and she said I was overreacting, that packing a lunch isn't a big deal, and that it's just one of those small acts that make marriage easier. But I think that's the problem. Everyone acts like women should just do these small acts automatically. Those small things pile up until you realize you're doing 80% of the work. It's not about a sandwich. It's about balance. About both people giving effort without expecting the other to carry the load. The weird part is, I don't even mind sometimes making his lunch if I'm already in the kitchen. But I don't want it to be expected. That's the line I'm drawing. The other night, Ryan finally said, "It's not about the lunch, you know. It's that you stopped doing something that used to make me feel cared for." That hit me differently. I asked, "Why didn't you just say that instead of making me feel guilty?" He said he didn't know how to bring it up without sounding selfish. We ended up having a real conversation for once. I told him that I wasn't trying to stop showing love. I just needed more help so I don't burn out. We talked about splitting tasks more evenly. He'll handle laundry and dishes more often, and I'll still cook when I can. We even agreed to pack lunches together at night sometimes. So it's not just on one person, it's weird. But after that talk, things started to feel normal again. He apologized for being stubborn. I apologized for shutting down instead of explaining how much I'd been struggling. Marriage isn't just about who does what. It's about noticing when something isn't fair and fixing it before it festers. I think that's what we're learning. It's not my job to make my husband's lunch, but it is my job to communicate and his to listen. And maybe that's the real lesson in all of this update. It's been about 2.5 months since I first posted, and I wanted to give an update because things definitely didn't just settle quietly like I thought they would. If anything, this whole lunch thing ended up being a mirror for some deeper stuff in our marriage that we both hadn't dealt with. After our big talk, Ryan really did start helping more around the house. He took over laundry and dishes, and I noticed he was making an effort not to leave socks everywhere or dump his work bag in the hallway. He even started getting up a little earlier to make coffee for both of us. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress at first. It felt like a small weight was lifted. I'd come home from my shifts and find the kitchen clean or the dishwasher running, and it honestly made me feel appreciated. He didn't just say he got it. He actually showed it. But then the little comments from his mom started again. She calls a lot, and sometimes I can hear her on speaker saying stuff like, "I hope you're eating decent lunches now that Emily's so busy." One time when we visited, she joked that she could teach me how to meal prep like a good wife. I know she didn't mean it maliciously, but it still grated on me. Ryan would just laugh awkwardly and change the subject. Later I told him, "You need to say something when she makes comments like that. It makes me feel like she thinks I'm neglecting you," he said. "She's old-fashioned, Em, that's just how she talks," I said. "Then maybe she needs to learn new ways to talk." He didn't argue, but I could tell he was torn. He's close with his mom, and I get that. I just wish he understood how exhausting it is to constantly feel like I'm being judged by someone who thinks my value is tied to domestic chores. The next few weeks were okay. We found a rhythm where whoever was up first would prep breakfast or coffee, and we started meal prepping lunches together on Sundays. I actually liked that part. It was low stress and kind of fun. We'd play music, chop veggies, and talk about our week, but then came the curveball. Ryan got promoted at work, which meant longer hours and more responsibility. I was genuinely happy for him. It was something he'd been working toward for years. But it also meant he started slipping back into old habits. Late nights, dirty dishes piling up, him forgetting to do laundry, and me quietly picking up the slack. At first, I didn't say anything. I thought, okay, it's just a transition period. He's stressed. But one night, after a particularly brutal 14-hour shift, I came home to find the kitchen a disaster. Dishes everywhere, empty takeout boxes, his lunchbox still sitting on the counter from the morning before, open. With food still in it, I just stood there staring at it. Not because of the mess, but because it felt like I was right back where we started. I went upstairs, and he was already asleep. I didn't wake him, but I barely slept myself. The next morning, I told him we needed to talk. He looked tired but nodded. I said, "I feel like everything we talked about just evaporated. You promised to help. You promised this wouldn't be one-sided again." He sighed and said, "I know, Em. I've just been so busy," I said. "So have I. That's the point. We're both busy. I'm not mad that you're tired. I'm mad that I keep being the one who adjusts." That finally seemed to hit him. He apologized, but this time I didn't want just words. I told him we needed a real plan. I suggested we split things by tasks instead of just doing them when we can. He takes laundry, trash, and grocery runs. I handle cooking and cleaning up after dinner. As long as it's shared on weekends, he agreed. We even wrote it on the whiteboard in the kitchen like two adults trying to pass Marriage 101. The difference has been noticeable. It's not always perfectly balanced, but there's effort, and that means a lot. I also think he's starting to realize that love isn't measured by sandwiches or notes in a lunchbox, but by partnership. A few days ago, he surprised me by packing my lunch before my shift. He left a little sticky note on top that said, "Don't forget to eat, Nurse of the Year." It made me laugh, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were back on the same team. He even talked to his mom. He told her that we share responsibilities now because that's what works for us, and that she needed to respect that. She didn't like it at first, but she's backed off. When we visited last weekend, she said, "You two seem really happy lately." And I said, "We are, because we are." It's funny, this whole thing started over a packed lunch, but it turned into a conversation about fairness, communication, and respect. I used to think asking for help made me sound ungrateful or weak. Now I realize it's the opposite. It means I care enough about our marriage to not let resentment take root. And maybe that's the quiet part no one talks about. When you stop doing something that used to be a gesture of love, it doesn't have to mean the love is gone. It can just mean it's time for both people to grow up a little. Final update. It's been almost 6 months since my original post, and I can honestly say this whole thing changed our marriage more than I expected. Not overnight, but in all the small, quiet ways that actually matter. The first few months after my last update were steady. Ryan and I kept to our whiteboard system, and for once, it didn't feel like we were keeping score. It just became part of our rhythm. I'd come home to folded laundry, he'd come home to dinner on the stove, and we'd both actually say thank you. That sounds basic. But gratitude had disappeared from our relationship for a while, replaced with silent expectation. Getting it back made a difference. Then life threw its usual curveballs. I switched to night shifts for a few weeks, which completely flipped our schedules. I was leaving for work when he was coming home, and we'd only see each other in passing. That's when we really tested how well we'd learned from all this before. That kind of schedule would have meant the house slowly falling apart. Me quietly cleaning on my days off while he claimed exhaustion. But this time he stepped up. Without me asking, I'd come home from the hospital and find the trash out, the kitchen clean, and my scrubs washed. He even started leaving me little post-it notes on the counter with dumb jokes or drawings. One morning, I came home around 7:30 a.m., completely wiped. I opened the fridge and saw a lunchbox sitting on the top shelf with a note on it that said, "Don't forget to eat this time. Love you." Inside was a sandwich, a granola bar, and a small thermos of coffee. He'd packed it for me before heading out. I just stood there in the kitchen and cried, not because of the food, but because that's what I'd been trying to explain months ago. It's not about the chore. It's about the effort, the care, the awareness of each other's exhaustion. A week later, we went to his parents' place for his dad's birthday dinner. I won't lie, I was nervous. His mom, Linda, hadn't said much since their last conversation, but I knew she still had her opinions. At dinner, everything was normal until his sister, who's newly married, started talking about how her husband forgets his lunch all the time. Linda said, "That's why you have to pack it for him, honey. Men never think of those things." Before I could even react, Ryan said, "I used to think that way too. But honestly, Emily works just as hard as I do. We share that stuff now." The room went quiet for a second, and then his sister smiled and said, "Yeah, that makes sense." Linda didn't say much after that. Later that night, she actually pulled me aside in the kitchen and said, "You two seem solid. You must be doing something right." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it felt like acknowledgement. I'll take it. At home, we've kept up our balance. We still have our off days, sure. Sometimes I'll forget to start the laundry, or he'll leave dishes in the sink. But it's not a war anymore. It's a partnership. If one of us is having a hard week, the other picks up the slack. And we actually talk about it. The biggest change is how we handle those little unspoken expectations. We've started saying things out loud that we used to just assume. Like, "Can you grab groceries this week?" Or, "I don't have energy to cook tonight, can we order in?" It sounds simple, But removing the guesswork saved us from so many unnecessary fights. One night, I asked Ryan if he ever missed the old days when I used to pack his lunches without him thinking about it. He smiled and said, "Honestly, I like this better. It feels like we're a team now," and that was it. That's all I ever wanted to hear. So, is it a wife's responsibility to make her husband's lunch? No, but it can be a small act of love, just like a husband making his wife's lunch, or cleaning her car, or brewing her coffee before work. The difference is when it's a choice, not an obligation. Somewhere along the way, we stopped keeping score and started paying attention. And it turns out, that's what makes everything else fall into place. We're still busy, still tired, still human, but now, we're also balanced. And honestly, that feels like the best kind of love there is. Stories number 11. Refusing to cover a coworker's shift because she can't handle her responsibilities. I, 29F, work as a shift supervisor at a mid-sized grocery store in North Carolina. I've been there for about 6 years now, and I like to think I've earned my position. I started as a cashier, worked my way up, and now I'm responsible for managing the front end, making schedules and keeping things running smoothly. There's a coworker of mine, let's call her Amanda, 26F, who transferred to our store about a year ago. When she first started, she was great, friendly, hardworking, and eager to learn. I remember even recommending her to management for extra hours because she seemed reliable. But things started to change about 6 months in. Amanda started showing up late. At first it was just a few minutes here and there, but then it turned into 15-20 minutes consistently. She'd always have an excuse. Her alarm didn't go off. Her car wouldn't start. Her dog got sick. Traffic was bad, and so on. We all have bad days. So I tried to be understanding at first, but it became a pattern. On top of that, she started swapping shifts last minute. She'd text people an hour before saying she couldn't make it, asking if anyone could cover. Sometimes she'd even ask me directly, even when I wasn't scheduled as a supervisor. I'm not technically supposed to cover regular employee shifts unless it's an emergency, but I've helped out before. Still, it's not supposed to be a habit. A few weeks ago, things came to a head. Amanda was scheduled for a Sunday closing shift. That's one of our busiest times. And we were already short-staffed because 2 other employees were on approved vacation. Around noon, I got a text from her that said, "Hey, I can't make it in tonight. Can you cover for me?" No explanation, no attempt to trade shifts, just that. I asked what was going on, and she said she was feeling overwhelmed lately and needed a mental break. I get that. Mental health is important. But she hadn't mentioned anything about this before, and it was less than 6 hours' notice. I told her that I couldn't just step in because we had no coverage plan, and that if she needed time off for mental health, she needed to request it through HR properly. She didn't reply after that. That night, she didn't show. We scrambled to get through the shift with 2 fewer people than usual. It was chaotic. I had to stay 2 extra hours just to close properly. And the next morning, my manager, Brian, called me asking what happened. I explained the situation and showed him the texts. He sighed and said, "Yeah, this isn't the first time she's done this. Apparently, she'd been pulling the same thing on other departments too. The bakery manager said she'd no-showed twice the previous month. HR had already warned her once, but they were trying to be understanding. 2 days later, she texted me again asking if I could cover another shift that weekend. This time, she said she had a lot going on at home and needed some time to get things together. I told her, "I'm sorry, but I can't keep rearranging my schedule to cover for you. You need to talk to Brian if you're struggling." She didn't take that well. She replied, "Wow, I thought you, of all people, would understand. You talk about mental health all the time, and now you're judging me for needing space." That hit a nerve. I do talk about mental health. I've had my own burnout moments, and I've taken time off when I needed it. But I did it the right way. Requested time off in advance. Communicated clearly and made sure my team wasn't left hanging. There's a difference between taking care of yourself and dumping your work on someone else. I didn't respond to her message. The next day, she called out again, and this time, HR got involved. They asked me to write a statement about what happened, which I did. Amanda must have found out, because she confronted me in the break room later that week. She said, "You didn't have to throw me under the bus. I just needed help, I told her calmly. You didn't get written up because of me. You got written up because you keep missing shifts without notice. That's not me being mean. That's company policy. She rolled her eyes and said, You're supposed to be a leader. Leaders help people, not make them look bad, I said. Leaders also hold people accountable. You can't keep expecting everyone else to pick up your slack. That was the last real conversation we had. She's been distant ever since. Barely says hi. Barely does her job, and when she does talk to others, it's usually about how cold I am last week. Brian pulled me aside and said Amanda's performance has officially been documented as unsatisfactory. He didn't say whether she'd be let go, but the tone made it sound like it's on the table. Now I can't stop thinking about the whole thing. I don't feel guilty for not covering her shifts. It's not my responsibility. But I do feel conflicted about the whole mental health part. I know she's been going through stuff personally. Her roommate moved out suddenly. She's behind on rent. And I heard her mention family drama once. I get it. Life's heavy sometimes. But I can't keep letting her problems spill into my work life. A few coworkers told me they think I did the right thing, that Amanda's been taking advantage of people's empathy. But another coworker, Jenna, said, Maybe you could have just covered that one shift to help her out. You don't know what she's going through. Maybe she's right. Maybe I could have done more. But then again, if I keep bailing her out, when does it stop being help and start being enabling? This past Friday, I saw Amanda standing outside during her lunch break. Crying and smoking, I walked past, and she looked at me for a second, like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. I didn't either. That moment has stuck with me. Part of me wishes I could fix things between us. But part of me knows it's not my job to be her safety net. I'm already managing a full team of adults. I can be compassionate without being a doormat. Still, I can't shake the feeling that maybe there's no perfect answer here. Just boundaries, and the cost of keeping them. Update. It's been about 2 months since the HR intervention, and things have finally started to settle. Though not without drama. After the last incident, HR had a formal meeting with Amanda. I wasn't required to attend, but I was asked to provide a statement, which I did. I was honest. Documented her repeated last-minute no-shows, the texts asking for me to cover, and the impact it had on the team. A week later, Amanda was officially put on a performance improvement plan. The plan was clear. She had to adhere to her schedule, communicate any issues at least 24 hours in advance, and complete her responsibilities without asking others to cover for her, unless absolutely unavoidable. HR told her that failure to comply could lead to termination. I'll admit, I felt some relief. I didn't want her to lose her job. I knew she was struggling personally. But I also couldn't keep sacrificing my own schedule. My energy and my sanity to pick up her slack, it wasn't sustainable. At first, she seemed to respond to the plan. She showed up on time for a few shifts, completed her tasks without prompting, and didn't ask me to cover anything. I thought maybe this was the turning point. Maybe she finally realized boundaries weren't meant to punish her, but to protect everyone, including herself. But old habits die hard. About a month in, she called out sick last minute twice, both times. She gave more detail about her situation, family stuff, her roommate drama. But the timing was still terrible. I had to work an extra shift those nights, and the other team members were frustrated. This time, though, I didn't hesitate. I reminded her, and the rest of the team, to avoid drama, that HR had already warned her, and that repeated violations of the plan could result in serious consequences. It felt awkward, because I've known her for a year, and I didn't want to be harsh. But it was necessary. After that, she became noticeably distant. She avoided eye contact in the break room and barely spoke to me except when absolutely required. I won't lie, it stung a little. I'd liked her when she first started. We used to joke about silly stuff at work, share memes in the group chat, and even swap tips on handling difficult customers. But once the no-shows and shift requests piled up, the friendly connection just evaporated. Meanwhile, the rest of the team adjusted well. The shift rotations stabilized, morale improved, and I noticed that even Ryan, another supervisor, commented that it was easier to manage the floor now without all the last-minute juggling. I realized how much mental energy I'd been spending worrying about Amanda's shifts instead of focusing on my own work and my team. One day, Amanda finally approached me privately. She said she understood I couldn't keep covering for her and apologized for putting me in that position multiple times. She didn't make excuses this time. She said she was trying to get her life together, and that she was committed to sticking to the plan. I didn't hug her or anything. I've learned not to let feelings override boundaries. But I told her I appreciated the acknowledgement and hoped she could follow through. Over the next few weeks, she actually did improve. She started showing up on time consistently, asking for help appropriately when necessary, and even offered to cover shifts for coworkers in emergency situations. Slowly, the tension between us faded. We're not best friends, but we can work together without resentment or passive aggression. The takeaway for me has been huge. I realized that boundaries aren't just for protecting yourself. They're also for helping someone else grow. By refusing to keep covering her, I forced Amanda to face the consequences of her actions. And while it was uncomfortable at first, it actually gave her the opportunity to improve, rather than enabling a habit that would have caused long-term problems for everyone. Now, when I see her handling her responsibilities without leaning on me or anyone else, I feel a quiet sense of satisfaction. Not because I'm vindictive, but because things are finally fair. I also feel more confident about standing my ground in the future. I know what I'm willing to do and what I'm not, and that clarity has made the work environment a lot less stressful. I still think about those moments when she was struggling and I felt guilty for saying no. But I also know that if I hadn't, the whole team would have continued suffering. And Amanda might never have learned the importance of accountability. Sometimes the hardest thing is the right thing. Final update. It's been about 6 months since everything with Amanda started, and I can honestly say the workplace feels completely different now. The tension that had been hanging over the team finally lifted. And not just because Amanda adjusted, although she did, but because everyone, including me, learned some important lessons about boundaries, accountability, and communication. Amanda has actually improved a lot. She hasn't missed a shift without proper notice since her last warning. She shows up on time, and she's been more engaged in her work. She even started helping new employees learn procedures without being asked. The change didn't happen overnight, and there were some slip-ups. But HR has noted her improvement, and she's no longer under a formal performance plan. For me personally, the whole experience reshaped how I approach leadership. I realized that being a leader doesn't mean bending over backward for every request. Even if it's framed as help, it means setting clear expectations and holding people accountable. But still being fair and supportive, I also learned to trust myself and my judgment more. I don't have to feel guilty for saying no when a request crosses a boundary. My relationship with Amanda is professional now. We're polite, communicate when necessary, and there's no underlying resentment. On my end, at least she's kept her distance, but it feels healthy rather than hostile. I think we both recognized that trying to maintain a friendly dynamic while she was shirking responsibilities wasn't realistic. Now, we're both focused on doing our jobs well. The rest of the team has responded positively to the change. Morale is better, the floor runs more smoothly, and I notice fewer complaints about last-minute coverage issues. I even get occasional thanks from coworkers who notice that I'm no longer carrying someone else's load. It's validating, but more importantly, it's sustainable. There have been small moments that remind me why this mattered. Like the other day, a new hire accidentally scheduled herself for a shift she couldn't cover. Panicking that she'd get in trouble, Amanda actually stepped in to help her trade shifts appropriately, showing empathy without causing extra work for anyone else. It made me realize she's learning the difference between asking for help responsibly and dumping work on others. I don't bring up the old issues with Amanda, and she hasn't brought them up with me either. It's not about grudges, it's about moving forward. I've also realized that the stress I felt wasn't just about her behavior. It was about the lack of clarity and structure in our roles. Now that boundaries are clear and everyone understands expectations, the workplace is healthier for everyone. Ultimately, I think the experience taught me something I didn't fully understand before. Helping someone doesn't always mean doing it for them. Sometimes the best help is guiding them to take responsibility for their own work. It's hard, It can feel uncomfortable, and it might make someone upset temporarily. But in the long run, it allows everyone, including the person struggling, to grow and succeed. I don't feel guilty anymore about refusing to cover her shifts. I know I did the right thing for myself, my team, and even Amanda. Work is a lot less stressful. I sleep better at night, and I feel like I'm finally leading in a way that's fair, effective, and sustainable. In the end, I guess the lesson is this: boundaries are not selfish. Accountability is not mean, and sometimes, standing your ground is the most compassionate thing you can do. For yourself, and for everyone else. Quitting my job in my in-laws' family business without notice. I 27F, have been working at my in-laws' family business for about 2 years. The company is a small but growing landscaping and property maintenance business in Georgia, owned by my husband's parents, Tom and Linda. My husband, Jason, 30M, is involved as well, though he mostly handles client relations and scheduling, while I've been doing admin work, bookkeeping, and some customer service. When I first joined, I was excited. It seemed like a good opportunity to learn the business, help the family, and have some extra income. Things started fine. I was paid fairly, my work was appreciated, and everyone seemed happy with my contributions. But over time, I realized the dynamics were more complicated than I expected. From the beginning, boundaries were fuzzy. Tom and Linda often expected me to do extra work without notice, including answering emails after hours, dealing with irate clients, and even doing errands for them. At first, I accepted it because I didn't want to create tension in the family. I figured it was temporary. Jason tried to support me, but was often caught in the middle. He'd tell his parents, "She's already working a full schedule. She can't do everything." But his parents would shrug it off or insist, "She's family. She can help." It made me feel stuck, like saying no was a betrayal. The tipping point came about a month ago. Tom asked me to reorganize the entire supply inventory and redo all client invoices within 2 days, in addition to my usual workload. When I said it was too much for one person in that time frame, Linda said, "You're smart. You'll figure it out. Don't make excuses." I tried, but it was impossible. I stayed late, skipped lunch, and barely slept. By the end of the second day, I was exhausted and frustrated, and Jason noticed I was close to breaking that night. I told him I didn't want to continue working there. I'd given it my all, but the boundaries, the constant extra tasks, and the lack of respect were too much. I couldn't stay in a place where I was being taken advantage of just because of family connections. Jason understood and supported me emotionally, but we both knew the conversation with his parents would be tough. The next morning, I went into the office and handed in my resignation verbally, saying I couldn't continue working there. I didn't give 2 weeks' notice. Partly I was angry, and partly I was afraid of how long it would take for them to accept it. Tom looked shocked, Linda looked hurt, and Jason looked nervous. I said, "I'm sorry, but I need to do this for my mental health. I can't keep this up." The fallout was immediate. Tom said I was being unprofessional. Linda accused me of betraying the family, and Jason tried to mediate. Other employees who were close to the family started gossiping. My husband was upset because he didn't want tension between his parents and me, but he also understood why I quit. In the days that followed, Tom and Linda have barely spoken to me, and family dinners have been awkward. I've tried to maintain a polite distance, but the tension is palpable. Jason supports me, but he's frustrated that his parents reacted this way instead of listening to my concerns. Part of me wonders if I should have given notice, written a formal resignation letter, or handled it differently. I know quitting without notice is generally considered unprofessional, but I felt trapped and burned out. I've been offered another job that's less stressful, pays better, and has clear boundaries, which makes me feel validated in my decision. I keep replaying the situation in my head. Did I handle it correctly? Did I damage my relationship with my in-laws irreparably? Or was staying longer just going to hurt me more?